What's up, everybody? How y'all doing today? I'm super excited. Welcome to the B&E podcast, the beginning of the never ending. I'm excited for a really special guest, to kind of jump into the story of his life. As a man I've known for a long time. You know how like you kind of stalk people, but you don't really want to introduce yourself. And I'm really excited to have him in the chair just to get to know him and get to hear his story and his life. So for anyone who doesn't know, this is the journey of people. Our goal is to kind of archive the lives of individuals who are not just the passerbys, the people you walk by every day, but people who are making a big influence not only in their own families' lives, but even in on a larger scale. And the goal is just to be able to kind of hear their stories, hear their transformations, and follow their journeys as they move on through life. So I'm super excited to introduce today Mr. Cameron Grant, also known as Cam Gnarly. What's up? Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Glad to be here.
I'm excited.
It's very rare when both of my names are introduced at the same time.
I know it's a little bit exposed, right? But I think it's gonna be cool. And so I always like to start off with like just where did it all begin? I'm really curious to kind of like where your background is, ancestries wise. Do you kind of know where you
Oh, my ancestry. Interesting that you asked that too. Me and my homies are having the reparations conversation recently. Like, do you got your paperwork? But primarily my origins are Nigerian originally.
Ooh.
And like and then I think it's what else, like it's a little bit of West Indian too.
Oh, okay.
And my great grandmother is from New Orleans. Are we good?
Yeah, we straight.
Okay. So yeah. Damn, I kind of got lost. But
My bad.
no. But yeah, like primarily, I would say like I'm like 30% Nigerian. My aunt did our ancestry. So over COVID, I learned that, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. So that was really enlightening. But my family originally on my my father's side, it's probably way more people. But they're from the South originally. Like my grandfather's from like Mississippi, and my grandmother's family is from New Orleans. And then during that Great Migration, a lot of them moved to California, moved out west. So then my grandfather and them lived in San Francisco for a little while, and they ended up in Venice, California. That's where my father is from. He's the youngest of 10 kids. And then my mother is from, I got hella cousins. I got hella aunts and uncles. And then
youngest of 10 kids.
Yeah, youngest of 10. And my family's a big, the women in my family run everything. So him being the youngest child of the oldest matriarch, he became the patriarch in that way too. But he does not shy away from standing by my mother at certain times as well. So, and my mother is from Chicago. I don't know as much about her background. Her family's a little different, but they are from the Midwest, so like Chicago, Memphis. That's where my mother originally migrated from, Chicago, when she was like 5 years old, and started going to school in Venice, and or not in Venice, but at Fairfax in L.A. And my dad's sister was the cheer coach of the team that she was on, and he used to drive them. And eventually he mustered up the courage to ask her to link up, and they always got close, and it kind of worked out because my mother comes from a very small family, and she never really knew her father like that. So then when she met my dad, it's like the complete opposite. He's like big family man, comes from a really big family. So when they embraced her, that was kind of like the start of their lives.
Yo, that's super cool. I'm going to take a back just a tad.
Yeah.
One of the things I'm really curious about is that you mentioned that your great-grandmother, right?
Yeah.
She's also from the South as well?
Yeah. I don't know. I know the family names, like the Delonis and the Hutchinsons.
Wow.
Out of New Orleans. And interesting about it, like, my family on my father's side, they always say like we're a very charmed family. They say that they were magical, mystical, like voodoo people.
Yo.
So like
That's so awesome.
So, you know, a lot of times when I feel like I've lived a very charmed life, a lot of serendipitous situations that led to one thing or another. So that's kind of why I'm able to remember so much of my past, because so much of it is just like these scenarios that I could not have written. It just kind of happened that way. But so yeah, that's the history for, on my mother's, on my I'm sorry, my father's side. Even my grandmother, who was the matriarch of our family, she was very what you say, like a clairvoyant woman. She had dreams and would see things and have feelings and know things before they would happen sometimes. And I feel like I got a little bit of that as well, like just in my understanding of the way the world works and being moved by my intuition and kind of knowing which way to go sometimes without action, without knowing why.
But it's super cool because one of the things you mentioned is that you said your grandfather, and this is from father's side, right?
Yeah.
From Mississippi. Your grandmother's from New Orleans. New Orleans have character, In Mississippi, Have you did you ever get to meet them or?
No, I didn't get to meet them. Like my dad being the youngest of 10.
Sure.
His eldest brother is almost 30 years older than him. You feel me? So
Sure.
It's a little it's far and in between. I have a lot of cousins I've never met or that I only experienced when I was a baby. So that I have a big family community. I've never lived anywhere that I didn't have like a cousin or an aunt or an uncle within like arm's reach before. So
did your father get to talk about his parents a lot?
Oh yeah, definitely. I was raised partly by my grandmother. When I went to originally I was born in Santa Monica. So my dad, my parents was both living in Los Angeles when they had me after losing their first son, and then to kind of like heal from that, they ended up moving from the whole family, as a matter of fact, at that time moved to the Inland Empire. So my grandmother, my grandfather, and a few of my aunts and uncles got a house in Fontana, Fontana, and then my father followed suit as well and ended up getting a house in San Bernardino. So during that time, it was like early 90s. They was working a lot. Both my parents worked in the healthcare. And then I would, go to school with my cousins. All my cousins are like my brothers and sisters. So I have my immediate family, like my brother, who was like right there with me. And then I had 5 older cousins who were like my older siblings who, we all went to the same elementary school. So all of my teachers would know me. And we all had different last names as well because, the family that was living with my grandmother was all the daughters. So they would have different last names because they all had previous marriages. And then I would have the family last name. So that was always interesting because my cousins would always tell them like, oh, there's another one of us coming, So me and my brother were like the last ones to go through the school. And that's kind of like where my creative journey really started, because I didn't realize this until way later, but I went to a performing arts elementary school.
Oh, okay.
So for me, I didn't know that. I thought that was just school, Like I thought playing instruments and singing in plays and singing, stuff like that was just like what school was. But it wasn't until like actually years later where I had like this aha moment, like, oh dang, like I didn't even realize like that's what we were in. And I feel like creatively I had a lot of moments like that where I was just doing something that I was really interested in, didn't really understand how I found myself there, and then had somebody tap me on the shoulder like, hey, you're closer to this than you think. So but yeah, I went to elementary school in Fontana called Harupa Hills Elementary School. It's not even there no more.
Yeah.
But it was a performing arts school. And also during that time when I was really young, I sang in the school choir. And then my grandmother was a very religious woman. So, and they all, I was baptized at New Bethel Baptist Church in Venice.
This is mother's side, right?
No, that's on my father's side. My mother's side was mostly all Midwest.
Okay, so excuse me. So you got to meet your grandmother?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Very
So
close. I was very close.
It was just the great grandmother. You obviously couldn't.
Yeah. I never met my
great
grandmother.
So
I met my great grandmother on my mother's side.
Oh well.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's a little bit of a different story. But I grew up primarily around my father's side because there were so many of them. So on my mother's side, I would spend some time with my grandmother sometimes, and I would spend time with my my mom's cousins, because she was the only child too, so she
Yeah.
didn't really have that as well. And
Oh,
like I said,
whoa.
yeah, my mother's the only child, so the juxtaposition's different. You know, she grew up with essentially just her and her mom, and then that would be sour sometimes, and then she was living with her aunt and her cousin, and then eventually met my father, and he's like just like, oh, we got this huge family, and they just
Sucked
brought
her
her
right
in.
in.
Yeah, brought her right in.
Like, yo.
So it's
That's
it's kind
awesome.
of funny too. Sometimes we called the family name from my grandmother on my father's side was Mama Grant, because she was the mama of all the Grants. All the Grant boys and girls. So it's interesting now. My dad being the youngest of the Grants, and I have
Mama Grant.
my
Love
girl.
it.
My girl, my friends and family will call my mom Mama Grant now. It's just interesting to watch that lineage pass on. But we have a very strong family for sure.
That's awesome.
I was, it was a long time before I even had really outside friends. I had so many
Sure.
cousins.
Yeah, so many.
I didn't have no outside friends. Like, I barely knew the neighbors. Like, it would just be with me and my cousins every day playing Nintendo, doing whatever. Like,
Yo.
that was our thing. So
That you mentioned creating was such a big part of your kind of like younger life.
Yeah.
Do you feel like your father or mother was really creative, or maybe your grandmother or grandfather? Like, who do you think you kind of got that from?
looking back, it was I feel like singing came from being a part of or more so from my father's side, because they all grew up in the church. So singing in the choir, singing at home, singing the hymns that my grandmother would sing while she was preparing our meals, or when my grandmother's watching me and all my cousins, and sometimes she would break us out into song and be like, hey, today we're going to sing My Girl. Let's go around the table and get, do your part. And I never forgot that first time that I was singing. We were all singing My Girl, and it got to my part, and I sang, and everybody had this reaction. And I remember that was the first time, and everybody was kind of looking at me like, dang, like, okay. And I was like, oh, that I really didn't realize that at the time, because originally I wanted to be a visual artist. I was really into drawing and sketching. For years I would get art sets and easels and stuff like that for Christmas, and that's that was really my that was really what I was into. I would be very quiet, and I would just like to draw a lot. And then singing was something that I could do, but in my head it was something that everybody in my family could do, because everybody would be singing. But singing like more so like church songs and stuff like that. But it wasn't until like years later when I started going around. My mom used to take us out to Compton, where her great grandmother lived, or her grandmother, which my great grandmother lived, and she lived at this like complex home, old folks apartment. And it was like quintessential, like if my grandmother's house was like Big Mama's house, where everybody's there and everybody be around, and we having Sunday dinners and Thanksgivings and all the kids is playing. My great grandmother's house is more like living at like a woman who lives by herself, plastic on the couches, plastic on everything. Don't sit, very, God bless you, but it was boring. It was really boring over there. But but she had a record collection that was crazy. And I would go through her records, and I would go through her records, and she would tell me about her former husband, like this man named Leo Cox. And wasn't even sure if we were like blood related, but my mother grew up around him, and he was a preacher and a poet and a singer and a community leader. And I would read some of his poems and see some of his artwork, and I used to think to myself like, oh, okay, this is where I get it from, in that regard. And then later on, my mother's cousin is Selena Johnson, who sang on Through the Wire with Kanye West. Or not? Was it not Through the Wire? But you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
All Falls Down.
Yo,
All Falls Down.
yes.
So, I never even met her, but it was always something interesting to me. Like, okay, like.
It's in the blood.
This is in my blood. It's in the family, like from both sides. Just to be creative and communal is very like
that charm. That charm you mentioned was something I find is really interesting, especially the kind of clairvoyant side. It's interesting that when you go and get touch base with your grandmothers or grandfathers or great grandmothers and stuff, like you get a taste of history, and that stuff can kind of trickle down and influence you even till this day, which I find is really cool. I also think this is really cool as well. You kind of mentioned this kind of like you obviously you have like the religious side of church, right?
Yeah.
But you also kind of have like this community family church,
Yeah.
like this constant like around the because not a lot of people, especially in the suburbs, especially in California, are like very family oriented. But it seems your family is really is trying to be grounded in that kind of family faith, and that's really really cool to kind of see that.
Yeah, I can definitely say we probably spent more time in the church together in my years, attending, going to funerals and things like that. But my family has such a rich history in the church in that area that we never, I didn't have to go to church that often to know God. I didn't have to go to church that often to know the Bible and to know Jesus and to know, you know, the lessons that were passed down and instilled in my family. So, kind of like when people say, church on the move, like it was that. But yeah, I was just raised in that, and then also took my own time to, get in touch with my own spirituality. But even before that, I have this vague memory of just like, I don't know what I would call it. I used to call it something, but it was something else I would call it that was kind of like a, like this give and take with the world, like what you get, what you put out, you get back in that way, or
Kind of karma almost.
a little bit, yeah, kind of like that, or even just or just trusting within my faith that whatever it is that I'm trying to accomplish or however I'm trying to get to it, as long as I stay solid within myself, like I will see those things come, and I feel like a lot of that comes from my family. I feel like I was never put in a place that I felt less or felt low. Even when I had times of having like my own personal inner turmoils, I could always rest knowing that I had my family. So I'm blessed to not truly know what it means to be all the way alone, unless I even took myself away. It was a choice, you know what I'm saying, to be alone. But I have so much family. Like it's not crazy. It's a gift, it's really a gift.
You was that do you feel like that was pushed or forced, or was it was just natural that your parents just kind of like gravitated to kind of bring you and your brother around?
I think it was just natural. We're a close knit family. My grandma was raising 10 kids in one house in Venice, and I went to that area just recently. It's complete gentrified. You wouldn't know 10 black kids raised right in that house between them Teslas and all them these new modern homes and stuff. But
That'd be an sorry, just side note. If you that'd be an awesome if you talked to that house and did a music video there.
I thought about that too. I went to the house. My pops. I was like, Pops, I'm over here in Venice, and he was telling me, I didn't spend a lot of time in Venice, but he would always tell me these stories, about playing football, being a gondolier and playing football at Venice High, and then him going to my grandmother was a teacher at the church down the street, and fighting people, getting into fights and stuff like that. He was there when they were filming Grease. They filmed Grease at his high school, and he met John Travolta through the fence, and it was like trying to eat off their little table and stuff. Just all these stories that it was like every time I would go back to Venice for the funerals or to visit family, it would just be full of these stories. And I've always grown up just between I grew up my life in the Inland Empire a lot, but I spent so much time bouncing back and forth between IE and LA. I even had so many of my own personal experiences because my dad grew up around, stayed very close to his friends growing up too. So all his cousins or all his homies and cousins who lived in like South Central area off of Crenshaw, Adams, Harcourt. Like, I had so much of my time, my weekends were spent there because even when we first moved to the IE, if we weren't at my grandmother's house, my mother would work graveyard shifts, so my dad was still working he worked at Daniel Freeman and St. John's in Los Angeles. So if my mom was working graveyard, we couldn't stay at home by ourselves, so he would take us with him. So for the first, I want to say like 11 or 12 years of my life, I was, we hit the 7-Eleven and get on the 10 freeway before the 210 was built and go straight to LA. And I would spend my weekends and my summers in LA off of Crenshaw, off of Adams, and off of Harcourt at my auntie Val's house. And those experiences too, had some of my first fights on them streets, had some of my first, stealing bikes and, all these stories, so many crazy stories, with my cousins that really gave me a very unique experience to be where we're at in California, and I always used to feel like I would go to LA and they'd be like, "Oh, you talk white. Why you talk white?" You know, like I go to a good school in the IE, and then I go to IE, and you're like, "Why are you so loud? Why are you ghetto?" And I'm like, "I be in LA, like y'all, y'all kind of slow." So it just made for a very unique experience because I feel like I was tapped into just two different communities, and I was able to find myself within that, and that's why also it's interesting too, where I look at it like that serendipitous thing where 10 years later, 10, 20 years later, here I am every other weekend driving to LA to go to an open mic or something like that, while also building my music community in the IE and doing it both ways, the same way I've always done it. So I've seen so many artists who like, man, I hate driving to I hate driving to LA. I don't know why you like doing that. Or so many people who are from out here who just hate LA. And I just don't have that mentality with it because I kind of grew up on both sides. I have I have, like I said, I have family on both ends. So to me, it's hard to say I hate it. I can say what I dislike about both sides, but the driving in itself is almost therapeutic for me. It reminds me a lot of growing up with my dad.
One of the things I find really cool here, your parents literally gave you kind of the culture, like really gave you the ability to be. I mean, it wasn't like obviously that's like the ideal situation, right? Bringing you to LA when they have to go to work and do their thing. But one of the things it finds is that that you are able to not only have that sense of freedom. One thing I find is really interesting now. Kids don't really understand the amount of freedom that it comes to be able to make mistakes and to be able to build connections, right? And to get hurt and just have to dust yourself off, right? Yeah. Be outside and really interact with that world,
for hours.
Just and you're talking graveyards, so like sometimes it feels like you're out there at night, like So obviously, I imagine that it's a controlled environment. But I think one of the things that I'm really curious about, one of the questions I have for you is that one of the things you mentioned here was that you were very kind of like artistic, and while going into, younger, I'm not sure if you ever got to explore that then, but going to LA and being in that type of world and environment, what do you find is like something that like in that LA space, do you find like, man, there's nothing like, i.e., like, I guess one of my question is, what gravitated you to LA? What makes you like it so much? What do you remember about it? Because LA is very different from what it was back then when you were a kid.
Yeah.
Any key moments or key memories that you're like, man, like just this city feels so magical versus where you're living in the suburbs, going to school out there?
Well, actually, I felt I felt a lot of similarities actually between where I lived in San Bernardino and what I was experiencing while going to school in San Bernardino, and what I was seeing with my cousins, or what I would do on my weekends in LA. So it was interesting because, like I said, at that time I'm from the IE,
right,
but my family is not. So they would identify as LA people. So going to LA was just like, kind of like I said, like just visiting family. So for me, it was kind of, I felt like this necessity to debunk a lot of stuff that IE people would say about LA, where especially it's the 90s, so there was like, in the area I grew up in, it was heavy gang culture. My cousins were falling into gang culture, being just black at that time. Even now, it's the same thing, kind of got to be hood adjacent a little bit to even get the pass to be where, in the areas that I was in. So, what I guess was what I liked about it.
Hood adjacent.
I'm just saying.
I love that.
I'm just saying that's how it is. But I guess like what I loved about it more than anything, it just felt like family to me. Like I never spent a lot of time in LA outside of just spending time with my family out there. So spending time in LA would be visiting all the different areas that my family lived in. So visiting Compton, visiting Culver City, visiting Long Beach, Inglewood, and then being in South Central. That was my experience, and all of that was just solely driven around visiting and being around my cousins. That's really what it was all about. And I guess my pursuits in LA never truly really didn't form until I started pursuing music. That's when it really began to be important for me to just kind of just build a bridge more than anything, because I feel like at a time there wasn't a lot of things going on musically in the Inland Empire, and I knew about stuff going on in LA to an extent, hearing about like Sean Healy events and doing, some of my earliest experience in LA doing events was like, doing, opening up for who I do, like me and my group at the time, we did a show with like the Cool Kids and Pac Div at the Key Club in like 2010 or something like that, or like doing a showcase at the House of Blues when I was like 19. That was really my experience at that time, and that was also around the time of like the early days of like the blog era and stuff like that. So I would really just be tapping in with the stuff that I was seeing on the internet and the artists that I was liking, and I would follow up and pull up to events and kind of get to know them and kind of like soak up game here and there. And I would do the same thing in the IE as well, like, and kind of just take it wherever I was at.
So one of the things you said earlier, and sorry, I'm kind of sorry if I'm stuck in this kind of like early childhood life.
Yeah.
I'm really curious here because one of the things you mentioned was that like I don't really know kind of like what it feels like to be alone. Like you have this, it feels like you had such a big network or an array of people that you can always contact or interact with or have fun. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. I imagine in life, of course, there's downs, right, and there's ups as well. But it feels like it feels like life was. I mean, I want to say like was it good childhood? Do you feel like your childhood was like, hey, I feel like it was having the family as support system, having an interaction.
I feel like I had a good childhood, and and in the areas that weren't good, I couldn't tell. And that's really what it's about,
That's
you know.
awesome.
So,
Yes.
and I really credit that to my parents. They just doing their job to allow me to stay in a child's place, whereas opposed to a lot of kids weren't. And even as well, I'm the oldest, so that didn't last very long. When I was like 9 years old, I started having those real conversations with my dad about like, all right, look, I need you to learn how to load this gun. I need you to know this is what we're going to do if this happens. This is what we're going to do if this happens. And a lot of those things all started with, all right, this is what you're going to do first. Like, go get your brothers. So in that regard, it was innocent. Like, it was fun.
Right.
And it wasn't like traumatic in that way. But it was all over the place. Like, for a large portion of the time when I was a kid, like, I saw my parents before I went to bed, or early in the morning before I went to school. And going to school meant waking up at like 5 o'clock in the morning so I could get to my grandmother's house at 6 o'clock in the morning so I can be at school at 9 o'clock. So like for me, that was normal, like I was a latchkey kid also growing up too. So I'm secure being alone, even though I guess like I was alone within a foundation. And I feel like my foundation, I feel at home in certain places. I feel at home in the Inland Empire. I feel at home in LA based on the foundations that I was able to be free in, to be out until the streetlights came on.
So then let me dig here because I'm just gonna dig. I'm sorry.
No,
I'm very
fine.
fascinated here.
Yeah.
Can you describe your parents' personalities? Can you describe kind of what your father was like?
Yeah.
What type of man you felt like he was, right? And who he is. I mean, kind of not transition now. And I'm really curious about your mother's side as well, because you felt like you had like almost two split worlds you were able to live in. The protectiveness. You mentioned that your great grandmother your great grandmother, plastic over everything. Really, hey, everything's organized. She has records, and they're like, dude, he's like some real,
Yeah.
And also only child as well. But you also mentioned like you had such a big family, such a big space to be able to kind of be yourself and create and understand a little bit more about yourself and feel a little more, I don't want to say vulnerable, but because these are cousins, right?
No, it's
so
cousins. They're like siblings too.
They're gonna, you can't be too soft, right?
Yeah, not at all. You know how it is with cousins.
I know, yeah.
It's a immediate hierarchy war. Like, who's the most powerful?
But it's cool that you could kind of have this dynamic. So I'm really curious how that feels for you. I'm curious about your parents.
My parents probably allowed me to understand duality more than anything. Because my dad, growing up, he was a very hard, strong, stern man to me. Like, that was his, even if that's not what he was trying to put off. And there were times I had recognized too that he didn't like being the heavy, he didn't like having to be that, but that's the energy that he gave. Very strong, stern, assertive man. And then my mother was so loving, so caring, so soft. And, something she would always say is just like, not Cameron, it's not about how you feel, it's about how you make other people feel. And my dad was very much like, can I curse on here?
Yeah, facts.
Very much like, fuck them. If they start talking shit, beat their ass. Like that kind of energy. And, kind of understand, like finding myself within those bounds of and absorbing that energy where there are times where I'm very much like my father and there are times that I'm very much like my mother. And
But your mom's from Chicago.
Yeah, yeah.
That's no.
No,
Like we talking like.
yeah, she had an interest. Her background is honestly the difference between my mother and father is crazy because my dad grew up. Not to say he didn't grow up like well off or anything like that. You know, it's like I said, it was
No.
He's
Sure.
the youngest of 10, and it was not easy for all of them either. But my mother's background is completely different too. You know, she didn't really know her father like that, and her mother had her at a young age too, and was very, you know, I'm sorry, Granny, a little negligent sometimes. I don't know if she's gonna watch this, but you know, they had a strained relationship. Let's say that they had a strained relationship. So my mother understands a lot of personal things that my father probably didn't have to experience. But my father, if I was to relate to my father, because what I recognize this within myself, or when he would tell me about love and what that meant to him, it meant like when I met your mother, I empathize with everything. I empathize with her. I saw her heart, and I decided that I wanted to take care of her. And I always was interested in that language, like the language that he would use in saying, like, take care of her, because he was mindful of the things that she had experienced and decided to create a space for her that she wouldn't have to experience those things anymore, or give her a certain life that she hadn't come from, while also, you know, and also continuing the legacy that he came from. And
Your parent, they don't lack work ethic.
not at all.
They
My parents are
Their attitude is like,
yeah.
I mean, you know what I mean? Do you feel like especially your mother, I definitely feels like she has a great student kind of mentality here. Yeah. You know, do you feel like your father was kind of in that same, because nursing and working graveyards is not an easy healthcare. Excuse me, not nursing, sir.
Yeah, they weren't working nursing, but yeah, working in healthcare. I never even said like hustling in that way, but they're just very smart in what they wanted to do, and the language that they use, even as well. That's why I work in education the way that I do. They would have many conversational meetings, like, you know, when you get into the job market, you want to work somewhere that isn't going anywhere, somewhere that's not going to go out of business. You understand? So he would say, you know, you can get into healthcare, you can get into education. You know, schools aren't going to go anywhere, hospitals aren't going to go anywhere, and then they come with great benefits as well. So he, you know, they stressed that and they showed that, you know, and what they did, and they worked their way up. You know, I remember my mother had she didn't graduate from high school, she got her GED, and that was probably a byproduct of what she experienced from her own mother and moving around a lot, but she got her GED later. And even now she's a supervisor for Kaiser Permanente without her degree, with just the years of experience. And I remember crying with her, hugging her, when she told me, like, I've been clocking in to work for, you know, almost 25 years, and now I'm on salary, and I'm looked to by all these people who felt like they were more educated than me, but I worked myself here. And, you know, and my father as well, to know him as to be the stern, hard man that he is and have such strong opinions about things, but to watch him be able to code switch and be able to do what was necessary for his family, and that be his battery. Like, you know, he sacrificed so much and had gone through so much. I know so much about my family that I could tell you their story and it wouldn't sound like I'm involved at all. You know, like, they have such a unique story of legacy and of love and of pain and of loss. And I feel like if anything I've learned from my family, all of them, not just my parents, but more than anything, it just showed me all of these different experiences that I was able to just watch and learn from and absorb. And I got to have my own personal experience as well as a creative, you know, being into the arts, and they would support that too. They also would find time to support that. You know, my pop's sure he would have wanted me to be playing at football at UCLA or something like that, but that just wasn't my path. But he supported that and supported me in that way. I remember my mother taking me to San Bernardino Adult School to take classes in art, you know, and she would sit there with me after her shift to watch me, like, learn how to do these different shading techniques and stuff like that. And I graduated from that little class when I was like 12 years old. And it was just always like, I always just felt like they nurtured my artistic side the same way they nurtured my brother's athletic side. You know, when my brother was getting all the different shoes to play sports in, that wasn't a concern of mine. I wanted these books and I wanted these pencils. I wanted these art sets and things like that. And then even when I made the transition to get into music, which wasn't so much of a transition. It was just like, okay, you about to start leaning on this other talent, that I never really got into. But I didn't start with singing too. That was so interesting because I sang in the choir. And my mother would always, sing it, that sing it, boy, that kind of thing.
Let's go.
And I was kind of like, I know I can sing, but it was nothing. I just enjoyed watching the reaction from my aunts and my uncles singing in the back of the car, and they would turn around like, hey, he really know that song, huh? Like, I like those, I like those experiences. But it wasn't until later on that I got into rapping when I was in like high school, and I just feel like during all that time, so much of growing up, music was so present in the household. If it wasn't from church songs to R&B songs to gangster rap and stuff like that, like so many memories of music being like so prevalent that I used to say all the time, like I've heard so many songs, I gotta start making my own, like. And something that we would do all the time too, we would always, me and my brother would sit in the back of the car and just change the lyrics to the song and start saying some weird, wacky stuff that putting chicken on your bacon or like something weird, just to be funny. And I just kind of started taking it a little more seriously.
No, I think the cool that gives you the sorry, you can drink water, man. I know
you're
going in, bro. No, you're fine.
Yeah, I'm very self-reflective. I know a lot about myself.
You definitely can push this back too. But one of the things I'm really, really, really fascinated. This is so cool. So one of the questions I have, right? Mm-hmm. You mentioned this kind of balance. I think of kind of yin and yang, or like this side of you, right? You have this like split culture. You also mentioned your father code switches as well, and kind of has like this able to interact and adapt to pretty much any environment or culture. I'm curious because one of the biggest milestones for most people, it's kind of that going from that middle school, elementary school, middle school to high school, right? Where you now really kind of find who you want to be, who you are. You kind of start really having to figure out like what your future looks like. And I'm curious on, like, you mentioned you never really had a lot of friends, but I'm curious to see, I mean, you imagine you had a lot of friends, but you didn't hang out with them, right? But I'm curious on like what was that dynamic that's kind of like that now stage if you're like, okay, whoa, now I'm kind of like becoming myself and finding. So how was your kind of high school experience?
I feel like I really started to find myself more when I stopped being around my cousins so often. So that was probably the first time where I was really like, what am I doing today? I'm not going to see my cousins. I don't go to my grandmother's house anymore. I used to beg my dad, like, can you take us back to Mama Grand's house? And he's like, I'm not driving all the way to Fontana. Like, you going to, hang out with your friends at school. So that was probably sometime after middle school. Sometime right at the beginning of middle school. So, because literally all the way from kindergarten to about 5th grade, I was very close and would see my cousins all the time.
Can I pause you just real quick?
Yeah.
What type of, were you like a shy person in that kind of element? Were you more like extroverted? Can you describe?
A little bit of both, like a little bit of a social butterfly. If I'm comfortable, I would talk. Very quiet at that time too. I used to draw a lot.
Got it.
But it just depended on the environment more than anything. I was like, a little smiley, chubby kid, and I would like joke a lot. Really into music, really into hip hop more than anything. I remember vividly had this folder that I wrote like every hip hop artist up until that point that I was a fan of on this folder, and it covered the front to the back, and I would really enjoy knowing like Grandmaster Flash and Furious 5, LL Cool J, Run DMC, and Sugar Hill Gang, and then writing down all my favorite labels and writing to the roster, from every label from Rockefeller to Bad Boy to like all these, that was really big. I was really big on that. So the people that I was friends with, we had a strong connection on music, like talking about rap or rapping or fashion or style, but more everything being hip hop. So the way I dressed, the way I talked, the way like the things that I was into really exuded the hip hop culture that I was into at that time. So I remember me and my brother rushing home every day to watch 106 in Park, or like trying to like control the TV to watch like nothing but music videos, waking up in the morning getting ready for school and watching watching MTV, those early morning music videos, and also just being into so much. Remember they used to play like Maroon 5 like every songs about Jane every morning, and being into all of those things, like and then also being a big fan of like Michael Jackson and Prince and my poster artist James Brown and and then I kind of feel like I went through those stages where when 50 dropped like Get Rich or Die Trying, and we was wearing the oversized t-shirts, and my mom was starting to get a little shook. I remember her telling me like, yo, I heard about this Marshall Mathers LP. Like, you're not gonna listen to this. And I remember sneaking into the closet at my house, and my homie around the corner let me borrow the CD, and I went to the closet to listen to it, and I was just shocked by what he was saying. He's talking about killing this girl and throwing her in the trunk and all that, and then even when I first heard Get Rich or Die Trying, that was also like the same Christmas where I got like these type headphones, like studio headphones. Right. So I remember being on the bus just like bumping in my headphones every single day. And then at that time it was so huge, like the effect of it was on the news and stuff like that. And my parents were, like I said, they came from a different type of background, so when they hear that, they think it's really like that. Or we also have a lot of family members that were really like that, so she'd be like, you're not gonna wear Pro Club's white t-shirts, I seen them on the news and that kind of thing. And just like, I remember this one time we were just driving home and my mom was like, I just want to let y'all know we're not listening to rap anymore. Like, rap is not what it used to be. We're not listening to it anymore. Because I loved, I grew up, growing up, I loved like House Party is one of my favorite movies. I love Kid and Play. Yes. I always thought like growing up it was going to look like that when you got to the parties and stuff like that. It wasn't like that. They were shooting them up. Like, so it was just interesting at that time, like finding myself and not growing away from my family, but growing up without being around my family. Like, I had such a mixed friend group. I had my friend, my white friends. I hang out with my homie Thomas and Chad and all those dudes. And then I would, that transition from going from middle school when you're still relatively a kid, because like I said, I went to a performing arts elementary school from kindergarten to 5th grade, right. And then that was the time to transition. I couldn't, my parents were officially working in the IE. My father worked at Loma Linda. My mother worked at Kaiser Riverside. We weren't going to be driving to LA every single weekend. They didn't want to have to drive to Fontana every single day anymore. The area that our house was built in started to develop more, so there were more locations to go, and they didn't feel like they had to do what they were doing anymore. So, I stopped going to LA as often, and I was really started being more centralized in the Inland Empire probably around the time that I was in middle school. And then the thing about middle school too was I went to a different elementary school just for 1 year. And that 1 year felt like, when you're a kid, it feels almost like 3 years, because that also was the makeup for the friend group that I would have going forward into my later years. And, from the girls that I would know and the guys that I would go to school with, I went to this one school for just 1 year. And then from there, I went to a middle school that was almost completely different, because imagine going from one school from K to 5, one other school for 6, and then you're in 7th grade. And when I get there, I'm just like, they cussing and all kinds of stuff. They gang banging and stuff like that. I thought, and my take at that time was like, well, how y'all gang banging? Like, this isn't LA, like, to me, gangbanging was a thing that was mostly in LA, and I would start to experience that more and more, because when I was in the IE, I was in the house with my cousins at my grandma's house. We wasn't going out like that or experiencing none of the street culture at that time. All my street culture stuff that I was learning and seeing was happening when my dad was at work and I was under the care of my auntie, which they would just be in the house or going to, Eminem's barbecue or something like that. And we would be in the streets all day. Me and my cousins ride the bikes, and we ride up and down Adams, up and down Crenshaw, and be all these different places, these different houses. And so to me, I thought that's where it was. And so then when I started going to middle school, that was probably the beginning of like, I'm starting to see, hear more about what's going on in my community. I'm starting to see kids that I'm going to school with getting into gangs and getting into drugs and having sex and, talking about, I went to this party last night, such and such got his ass whooped, or, and starting to really adapt to that and talk to my dad, telling him like, yo, like, I know you grew up in LA, but I'm telling you what I'm experiencing over here is completely different. Like, and I used to say that a lot, like, you grew up where in an area that was primarily black and y'all would have beef with these different cultures. My cultures that I'm experiencing are all like this big melting mixing pot, and it be beef, but it's more community based, like these different hoods and stuff like that. Yeah. So
I'm sorry. I have two questions here.
Oh yeah, sure. I'm just going
First
on.
one is I was curious if you felt like going through LA, going up Crenshaw, going up, you know what I mean? Did it feel like a fantasy? You mentioned hip hop's a big thing for you. Did it ever feel like you fantasize like being in a gang life? I don't know, but I'm just curious.
No, not really. It was not so much a fantasy, more of like a reality. Like it was more like my like I said, hood adjacent. Like I come from such a big family where I always had somebody that was into something. So my cousins that I was growing up around in LA were kind of like a mirror of me and my brother. Me and my brother is, and in LA is William and Wesley. So we would spend so much time with them. A lot of their experiences that we would have these convos. I'm like, yo, like what are y'all getting into? And just seeing the change happen, like as we got older, from being little kids, 5, 6, 7 years old, and getting older, 13, 14, and seeing our experiences be different. Seeing our music taste start to grow and be different because the people that they were around was different than what we were around. And I started to see the areas that kept us close was our history, but we started to really grow apart based on the things that they were choosing to do with their lives. And it also was like a lot of the earlier times where I really decided, some of the first choices I ever made was just not to be in a gang because it was just so readily available for me to join a gang because the people I was going to school with or the history I knew being, I could have easily said I'm from such and such crib, like my cousins from LA. Like I saw so many other kids who grew up in IE saying they from such and such, 'cause my uncle from blah blah blah, and I just chose to not be on that. And
do you know why? Can I just ask? Do you know why that is? You have this like this big, I don't want to say fascination, but like there's this. Like you said, it's in this music is in your blood. Like it seems like you're less so focused more on the culture but you mentioned that fashion was a big thing, hip hop's a big thing, but it seems like you I don't want to say smart enough, but like I
feel like I was definitely immersed in it, but it wasn't even so much smart enough. It was just like I said, it comes down to. There were so many times where I was having these conversations with my parents, arguing with like, I want to wear this or I want to do this. And they were, in the interest of my safety, didn't want me to do these things. And I would be like, why are you trying to, block me socially? Like what, and I was definitely smart enough to make my case to be like, if I want to wear this, what's the difference between y'all wearing afros and bell bottoms when y'all was doing your thing than me wanting to wear, I'm just trying to dress with what we doing. Like, this is what we're doing. And those conversations where you don't hear it now, but like why are your pants that big, or why is your shirt that big, or like not being able to explain those things. It was just like what it was at the time. But I feel like I was definitely immersed in just the culture at that time, and it wasn't called the culture back then. It was just what it was. It was just reality. What it was to be black in that area at that time. Like that's what we listened to. That's what we were dressing like. So, but I definitely feel like I was gonna say, it wasn't so much of it was a choice, but I feel like the choices that I made were a byproduct of the foundation that was made around me, and a lot of that goes back to my aunts, my uncles, my father.
So it was almost just not to put words in your mouth, but it's almost as if you didn't need to be a part of that because you had family was enough. Like,
we the biggest gang already. Yeah, the Grant gang is huge. It's like we don't, in that regard. Yeah. So I didn't really need that. Like that
makes sense.
It wasn't. And I feel like that probably too. I recognize a lot of people who got into gangs that was a byproduct of the area that they were growing up in, or not having people around and got to be a part of something. I never felt like I had to do anything extra to be a part of anything. Like I felt very secure in who I was and where I came from.
That's what's up. Okay. Now this is gonna lead me to my next question. You mentioned that your parents, it was just shocking, right? Just for me, right? One of the things you mentioned was that like you communicated with them, like, "Yo, pops, like what's going on out here? Is like the San Bernardino?
Yeah,
it feels like what's going on." So it seems like you and your parents have great communication. It seems like. Well, I mean, obviously you have.
Like I said, at that time, being the oldest, I would be a part of more adult conversations where it was like, look, I'm giving you this information so that you can pass it down to your brothers, or constantly being raised as the oldest with these levels of responsibility. And that's always just been something.
But you still felt like you had. Sorry, I hate interrupting you. But you felt like you also felt like it seems like you felt like you had the ability to still be a kid. Like does that make sense? Like they still seems like they gave you the freedom to kind of like, you know, be free and have your fun, make mistakes and do those things, but also the same like these like kind of bumpers on like a bowling alley, right? It's like, hey, hold up,
the responsibility bumpers of of expectation of responsibility to my family, to my household, and to my legacy of just what it meant to be a part of the family that I'm a part of. And I'm sure a lot of that is the same thing you would pick up in a gang culture where it's like, look, these are the rules. This is how you get down, and you can't, you know, that's what it was in my household. So, and I also feel like I had the upbringing in multiple households. Like there was my home for my immediate family. There was my home for my bigger family, or where my larger family from my father's side with me. There was my home at my grandmother's house. There was my home in LA at my auntie house. Like all these places, I felt very comfortable. So for me, I had all these different places to call home, all these different places to form my personality, all these different places to form my outlook. Like,
you mentioned, dude, I feel like I'm connecting the dots here, man. Sorry. One of the things I find cool is that you mentioned kind of going to the 6th grade, being just like, yo, who are these people? And then just like transitioning to like, what in the world is going on here?
Yeah.
You know, is that the first kind of one of the first times you felt like, because you mentioned this is the time you can't really go to you're like, hey, Pops, can we go to Fontana? No, I'm not driving away, right? So do you feel like this is the time where you felt like, yo, I need to create a new home. I need to find and build like a whole new home world. You know?
Yeah, I feel like how that started for me too was getting into sports. Right after high school, I got like immediately into playing football, freshman football, and that was like probably some of the first memories of high school for me was going into high school with that. Like I got to experience high school a little bit before I started high school. So we were doing summer football, me and my friends that I got really close with in elementary school, and those of us that joined the team at that time.
Is that Thomas and
some of them, but it was probably like my homie and stuff like that, and also just kind of just like growing. That was like the beginning of just like growing up in the area, growing up in the really on some Dino stuff at that time. So at the time, you know, first it was definitely in Shannon Hills, but I feel like my parents were, or my mother more especially, was like very hands-on with my education at that time. You know, would work with me and do my homework with me and help me do all these things. But by the time I got to high school, it was very much like, you got it, or not even like a conversation, or I was very much like, I got it, like let me be. So I was very reclusive. I, you know, kind of just starting to really form my own private life on a personal level. So first it was football, and I played football for a little while, and then I got out of football, and then I was in IB, you know, and that kind of thing. I got out of IB, then I was in Avid, and that was another community that I was a part of. Then I was in the Black Student Union, and then that was a different thing I was into. And then I was the manager of the basketball team because I hung out with all the dudes that hooped, and I like smoked weed with them, and they would be like, bro, you should be the manager of the team, you could leave to come with us to the games, you know. So I would, you know, go with them and film the games and stuff like that. And then, you know, like for me during that time, I had like a very select few friends, like very close friends, but I was that person who would just walk around school and kind of know everybody. I could go to whatever area of the campus and kick it with all these different people, but I probably only had like 2 or 3 like really, really close friends that I still talk to today. Like, you know, Kirk Sundstrom, Ryan Duncan, Alicia Alexander, like, you know, these people who grew up with me, super close to me, and probably were with me in every one of those areas and programs, from football to managing the basketball team, Black Student Union, Avid program, and then just being deeply immersed in rap and hip hop at that time. You know, who our favorite rappers was, what we were downloading on LimeWire, you know, making CDs. And then at the same time, I would draw at that time too. I would, you know, charge people like $10-$20 to draw their little favorite cartoon for their little slip-on folder and get, you know, that was the way that I would make money. So I would do that. That's just my high school experience in a nutshell. And then also like, dating girls and, getting into fights and going to parties and, and hearing about, and also some of the earliest memories of like losing friends to like street stuff like that. I remember the first time I had been like 13 or 14 where a person who was right next to me in their locker, Jamal Hamilton, was killed based on the gang violence in between these two particular area hoods that are still existing right now. So, experiencing that and seeing and going to my first funeral that wasn't a family funeral and seeing like, damn, like this shit is real and it's everywhere and it's around me. And that was like the first one and not the last. So many more of people who just disappeared in some way, shape, or form, if that being leaving this realm or leaving life or leaving the life or getting into things that, they couldn't come back from.
Right.
And, or had, friends who were having babies early. Also, at the time I was in school, kids, it was the Iraq war, people who went to war and were going to war, coming back different, and it was just, or also like people who got into drugs and things like that. Like, I feel like I had, very similar to my younger upbringing, like all these different experiences that I was learning from at the same time, even if it was secondhand.
Sure.
Sure. That was a very shaping time for me because that was probably the some of the most blatant shifting times ever, because how I started in high school was not the way that I ended, and then and the people who weren't there anymore, and just how those relationships formed me and within my education, like it just made I feel like I was having two educations at the same time.
So then what do you feel like was the difference? You mentioned that starting off high school, ending it. Do you feel like your personality changed, or just more like the way you saw the world change?
The way I saw the world change, for sure.
So you're still the same, still to the bone.
Yeah.
So you know who you are. You've already know who you are. That wasn't gonna change. It was just now that how you interacted with the world. Yeah. That was the difference.
Yeah, that definitely changed. And then I, shortly around that time, that's when I started making more of the decisions that I still see myself walking into this day, where it was like, okay, I wanted, like, for example, like, if I could like put it just into one spot, I remember not knowing what to put on my class ring, right? Like, so I was like, I want my class ring. I was like, I want it to look like kind of blingy, so I got the whole platinum joint with the big crystal, and then on one side I put art, and the other side was hip hop. That's what my class ring was. And at that time, even going into college, I went to college for like two and a half years, and even then, like I found myself right back at where I was before high school, before middle school, and I was like, okay, I want to learn arts. And then but more of what I learned as well from all of these different experiences, I would find myself really connecting with people through conversation, and kind of and because I feel like I had the parents that I had and the grandmother that I had, and I would be able to help people by talking to them. And something my mom would always say is like, you're really good at articulating your thought process. You should get into psychology. That was something I thought I'd get into. And so I was a psychology major. I remember I was an art major for literally only like 3-4 days, where I was just like, do I really want to study art? Like, I look at it like, I've been studying art my whole life. Like, maybe I should try something different. So I started going into psychology. And around that same time, like, one of the last new things that I had picked up at the end of high school was my junior year. I remember being like I said, I played football, and that was one of the first time that I was ever experiencing, on my point of view, like people rapping in circles, right? So, and why it's so funny, very similar to the convo when I was just like, where I'm talking to somebody about the elementary school that I went to, and my cousin looks over to me, who's like my older brother, and he like, you went to performing arts elementary school, right? So, like, the stuff that you're doing is not by chance. Like, you were educated in the ways of music and sound, and, like, you thought people were just doing talent shows at lunch every day. I'm like, they don't do that at all schools? He's like, no, like, that was a very unique thing. So, at that time, I'm in high school, and another person, R.I.P., my homie Holland, I remember being on the bus with him, and I remember him being in the back of the bus, and he's like, we're going to some school to play. And, that's, they would be like, oh, somebody bust a beat, and he started freestyling. And I remember he said something, I was just like, it blew my mind. I was like, how did he do that? And internally, I remember thinking to myself, like, I have to know how to do that. Like, I need to know how to do that. It bothered me that I couldn't come up with stuff on top of my head. So that was like the beginning of like my sophomore into my senior year, because that was like the last year I played football. My grandfather passed away. I remember I was sitting at practice for the next season going into my junior year, and somebody came to the fence and told me, like, hey, your dad's here to pick you up. They said your grandpa died. And I'm like, fuck. And I never went back. I was good. Like, so, because at that time, I remember I was like heavier set when I got into school, but I played football for 2.5 years. At that time, all the weight was like coming off me, and I was getting attention from girls, and I was really like, and my grades are good. I remember them, the coach coming to me, and he's like, why you ain't signed up this year? And I'm like, I don't know, man. I was like, oh, my grades. He's like, you lying? You got a 3.8. Like, you need to come play. And I was like, I don't want to. And then I kind of already didn't want to, but I felt like this obligation. But then when my grandfather passed away, I kind of also use that as an excuse to just be like, you know what, I'm out. Like, this happened on the day that I really wasn't feeling it anyway, and now this is exact reason to make my exit. So I had stopped playing football at that time, and that's when I got more into the Black Student Union and being the manager of the basketball team, because I got to just get out of stuff and be a part of stuff at the same time. So at that time, being around those guys was an extension of what I was experiencing during football, because we would be on the back of the bus and rapping. And I remember sometime over the summer between my junior and senior year, and I never got to tell him this because he passed away in a car accident at the year we graduated. He was saying that he said on the bus, he was like, traffic, looking for my chapstick, feeling kind of car sick. There's a Ford Maverick. And everybody on the bus was wilding. Like, the reaction is what really caught my attention. And I was like, dang. So that was a start. Like, I remember it, So then it's the summer before senior year, or like the summer after senior year, and I'm watching TV, and Malibu's Most Wanted comes on. And he was rapping that from the movie verbatim. And I remember, like, having this moment, like, oh my God, like, here I am forming all this pressure on myself to be like, yo, how can I do this? And he had took this from a movie. Like, I'm over here inspired by something he stole from whatever the actor's name is, but in my head at that time, I was just like, wow, this inspired me so much from him at that time, amongst other things too. Just like I said, like the style that we were into, the dances that we used to do, getting crump and all that. Like, that was all of those things led to us rapping. It went from dance circles to rap circles, and then seeing that, I was just like, I could dance, but can I rap? So then when I saw him do that, I was like, oh man, I can't believe it. And then sometime later he had passed away, but I always looked at that as just like, you never know the things that are going to inspire you, and you never know what kind of environment you'll be put in to be inspired, whether you know it or not. And, I really credit that too, because I remember having this thought process of like, I have to start taking the world around me and turning it into raps. And the way I thought about it was like, he saw a car and put it in a rap. I need to be able to see stuff in front of me and find a way to rap about it. That was like my earliest thoughts I remember of like, how do I take what I'm seeing in front of me and make it a rap? How do I do what I'm hearing my favorite artists do? So then also around that time too, into my first few years of college and my senior year, I remember people always just say, study the greats. So I would listen to Biggie's first 2 albums. I would listen to Nas, Illmatic. I would listen to Tupac. I would listen to, and I was still am, but I was a huge Lil Wayne fan. So my LimeWire, I destroyed a whole entire desktop, like, with that LimeWire. Like, we couldn't get on the internet for nothing. And then also, I'm just like talking about it, I'm reflecting so much. Like the MySpace days and just like putting music on your page, but Lil Wayne's music at that time, those mixtapes from the Suffix to the Drought to Dedications, like they were such a huge part of my friendship with those people that I was around, that I got really good at freestyling. I got really good at it. So then, and this is still early, I had no sign of a studio, no thought of wanting to be a rapper. I just wanted to be able to do it. So then when I got into college, that's something I would do. I'd go to parties, and at that time, it was very popular to freestyle. I would go to parties with these other guys, and we would be freestyling. I started being that guy who would show up to the party just to try to out rap somebody, you know, and maybe get a girl attention, get a number or something like that. That was my whole thing. Like, that was my whole thing.
That's so sad.
And that was around the time of, like, you know, I was really big into, this is before ever rapping on stage or writing, having a song at all. Like, I was really into the cool kids. I was really into, like, Asher Roth and Kid Cudi. And, like, this is my freshman year of, like, college at this time, where I'm just, like, learning about these artists, while also still trying to figure out what I'm doing in college at the time. And then not to mention, like, when College Dropout came out, too. Ooh. And then my mama telling me, like, you know, that's your cousin on that song, you know? And feeling that album, like, College Dropout, to me, was just, like, this resonating cry out to, like, to every, you know, to every middle class black kid who grew up in the church, who understands street shit, but you're not in the street shit, but you know it because you're a part of the culture at that time. But because gangster rap is what it is, Jay-Z's the biggest rapper there is. Biggie Smalls and Tupac are the new Martin and Malcolm. You know what I'm saying? Like, that energy, it would be W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. You know, and then it would be Martin and Malcolm and then Biggie and Tupac. Like, in my head, that's just what it was at that time. Like, that's the way I would look at the world. So then, you know, that. Yo. All of those things, like, when I first heard that album, I remember playing it for my family. Like I said, I was very communicative with my family about music. We would talk about music. I would share what I was listening to with them. So College Dropout was so big in my household. I remember I fought a kid for throwing my CD out the window. I really beat someone up for throwing my CD out the window and on the bus. But, like, cut to, like, you know, I'm in college and I was really into music at that time. And I hadn't seen my cousins in a long time, you know, because at this time I had went through high school and really didn't see my cousins. Even when I graduated, only like a bit of them came to my graduation party. And I would have, like, these serendipitous things still happening in my life where, you know, my grandmother had passed when I was in high school, and my grandfather as well. And that's when I started seeing family more just at funerals and seeing family more just when somebody is sick or something like that. So we started like little serendipitous stuff, like the family home that my grandmother had in Fontana was on Ash Drive. And then the family home that me and my parents, after years of them working and building from our little 3-bedroom house that we had in San Bernardino, they were able to get, like, this much bigger house that was very reminiscent to my grandmother's house, also on Ash. And we always thought, you know, I always thought that was just Mama Grant's grace, you know, seeing her through things. So and to this day, I still see her and stuff. There's still moments where she's just with me. I see her and I talk to her. I talk to her like I could call her, you know? And, so I remember it vividly. This is how I started getting into the studio. So I'm in college. I'm just, like, at school one day, and I get out of class, and I remember I had to stop at 7-Eleven for something. And I'm walking into 7-Eleven, and somebody walks by me, and I'm looking. I'm like, Kev, is that you? It's my cousin. And he's like, what? Swear to God, after that, we hung out together every day for 7 years. So he was, after that, we were like this after that. And then I got reconnected with my aunts and my uncles because I didn't see them anymore. And after the funeral, you know, like most black families, when a grandma and grandpa pass, it's kind of, you know, that's when stuff gets a little shaky. And it got shaky for us. You know, you stop seeing a lot of people. So when him and I got back together, it was like being reconnected with your older brother that you haven't seen in a long time. And he started taking me to all these different places. And at this time, I'm like 18, 19. And he took me to a studio for the first time. He knew a girl who knew another girl. And he was like, yo, like, he's like, called me one day. He's like, what you doing? And I was like, I'm about to go to the mall. And he was like, come, you know, I had friends in college and stuff like that. And, I was this close to joining Phi Beta Sigma fraternity with my homies at that time. The kids, you know, the guys that I was close to in college. You know, I have my college friends that I'm still close to this day. And one of them was like primarily was a friend from middle school who he had you know, like I said, my mother had a trouble past, so she had an open spot, soft spot for people who have that same kind of background. So I had this friend who he's like, hey, can I ride the bus with you to school tomorrow? And then he didn't leave for a year. So he was one of my last friends that knew my grandmother. So that's why I was so close to joining the frat. But when my cousin called me, it was one of those days where I was going to go to the mall so I can go to this frat thing, or I was going to go to the studio, and he invited me to the studio, and that's how I first got into my first group. I went over there to meet everybody, and I just started freestyling on the mic, and I didn't leave for like 2 years. And then my homies, the guy that I was working with at the time, his studio shut down, and then he moved all his studio equipment into this project in San Bernardino off of 2nd Street at the Meadowbrooks, which is a notoriously dangerous project apartments.
Yeah.
And that's where I made some of my first songs, like some of the first music I ever made. And then the people that were around believed in the music so much, they started forming organization around us, around, my girl I was dating at the time, her sister, like, I want to manage y'all. I'm going to get y'all, start booking y'all shows. She would book shows with Sean Healy and stuff like that. We were selling tickets to do shows at the House of Blues and stuff like that. And then I was I'm linked up with a popular DJ at the time who had like 5,000 friends on MySpace, and he decided to be our DJ. And then we went from that to, people hitting us up on MySpace because they liked the music. And then other people, I remember vividly, like back before Audio Push was called Audio Push, they used to be called The Push. And we opened up for Drake at the Fox Theater in downtown San Bernardino, and this is like 2009. And I remember introducing all my homies to Drake, because I used to watch Degrassi in high school. So I remember telling my cousin, like, bro, like, like I said, I love Lil Wayne. So I'm like, yo, this is Lil Wayne's protege. And I was like, and he's from Degrassi. I was like, honestly, there's no reason why, as a culture, we should be listening to him, because at that time, if he would have said the biggest rapper's protege is a child actor from Canada who's really good at music, like,
and was handicapped.
Exactly, yeah, in the show, like, it would be like, why, So I remember listening to like the first Drake song and stuff like that, being a big fan, and that was like some of my earliest shows. The people that I would open up for, I was just really a big fan of them, and that was really how, as an artist, I would form where I would go. Like, I've never been a thirsty person. Like I said, I've never gone somewhere on some, I'm trying to be thirsty or trying to be cool or seeking anything.
Yeah,
like I feel like I've been,
it,
I've always been very comfortable in who I am based on where I come from, my style, my energy. Like, that's just, like, I'm blessed that my family foundation built a strong individualism within me, because I was a part of a bigger thing. And I knew that no matter where I go, I'm a Grant, So, so we opened up for Drake in 2009. We started doing shows, and that's when a lot of the serendipitous things started happening. So
that's crazy.
I remember at the same time, somebody I went to high school with who would be rapping. I didn't rap at that time. Like I said, I didn't start rapping until much later, but he was a senior when I was a freshman. He went by the name of Big Papa at that time, and his name was Noah. His name later ended up being Noah James. So I had, we were making this music in this project apartment in San Bernardino, and these girls would be like, yo, like, there's this scene going on in Riverside. You should go. I heard about this spot called The Vibe in Riverside. They throw an event called Project Blowed. You should go. I'm like, all right, cool. So we go there. This is the first time I'm rapping on a mic on stage. Up until that point, we were just drinking and smoking and making music. I was a part of this group. The group was called the Hi-Hats, HIIHATTS. And it was me, the engineer, producer, INF, and this girl, Patty Stone. He loved like Digital Underground, and he was like a couple years older than me, and she was a little bit older than me too, and she was a huge Madonna fan. So we were probably like the equivalent of like the IE's Black Eyed Peas, kind of thing, where we were making, electronic mixture of music while the jerk music is happening at the same time, and then there's like that air of just like raw freestyle rap at the same time. So I remember,
if you got really experimental there, you could have built trap. You would have got trap.
We did eventually. It definitely got in there, but it was there. It was there.
Some trap house that came out. That would have been dope.
And then I remember going to the Vibe and seeing Noah, and I remember like, man, you remember me? He's like, yeah, I remember seeing you. We went to high school together. I was like, yeah, you were a senior when I was a freshman, and he was a super senior. So he would be around the year after too. So I remember seeing him and watching him rap, and he was throwing these events, and we would link up just off of the community strength of us going to the same high school. And that was kind of the beginning of like a new indoctrination to a new school for me, which was just like learning how to perform and getting into, picking up different styles of rap and learning new ways to rap and stuff like that. And I went through so many other transitions with like homies where I just couldn't make it happen. I remember I had a friend, we used to freestyle together, and I was like, I don't know what to call us. And I didn't, I would get a piece of paper and be like, try to write a rhyme, couldn't do it. But I could freestyle forever, but not write it down. I just could not do it. And so yeah, during the time, first I was in the hi-hats, and then I stopped being the hi-hats, and I took some time off from making music. I think that group lasted for about like 2 years, 3 years, and at that time we got a song with like 991. At that time, this is all happening. I'm like 19, so I really wasn't grasping what was happening, but I was doing cool stuff. So at that time, I even have a rap name. I was just the youngest of all the homies. I was gonna ask
you. I wrote it down. I was like, I'm curious.
Yeah, I was. They called me Kid Cam at that time because I was. When they would ask me how old I was, I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm 18, 19. They'd be like, you're a kid, and I'd be like, oh, my name is Cam. So eventually, they would just call me Kid Cam. And super like early cyber way, I was spelling like capital K, lowercase I, capital D, like that MySpace type writing. And even then, I was still finding myself as an artist, like just trying to find my place in it all, because I was receiving praise and popularity. Right. But I wasn't really like, it wasn't super intentional. I was just having fun. So, and having fun and resting on my laurels of like, I used to sing and stuff like that, but I still wasn't incorporating singing, and I was just rapping.
Right.
My favorite rapper was like Chuck English, and I was just like into that, rapping like MF Doom, that eclectic, rapping like Mikey Rocks, like saying all these wild, wacky lines after line after line. And so that group lasted for a little bit of time. We did some stuff. We opened up for like E40 and did some shows at like Stingers and all these like local clubs, and did some stuff and did everything on the Sunset Strip. Did the Knitting Factory and the Key Club, and I got to do a show with it was, like I said, it was us, Pac Div, and the Cool Kids at that time. And I remember showing up early to sound check because I was just such a fan of those guys. And I never really linked with the Cool Kids like that on a personal level. I see them a lot throughout my personal career, but I really got close with the guys from Pac Div. At that time, I linked up with Like and Mibs, and they were really nice, like good dudes. So then when I took some time away and the group was over, and I was just like, okay, what am I gonna do now? Because I had this, my friend, I would drag my homies at that time to shows. They would go to shows, we would go to shows, all these concerts, and I would freestyle here, freestyle there, and all the time people would be like, when you gonna start making music on your own? And I'm like, oh, I'm working on it. I wasn't, like, I was comfortable in the group that I was in, but when it came time to doing it by myself, I just didn't know what to do or where to start. And I credit to my homie Ramon, who used to be like, I loving this shit. It's cool going to these parties and you being tapped in all these people, but like, where's your music? Like, when I tell my homies that you're taking me here and there, they want to hear your music. Like, what's your music like? So I remember I took some time off, and then I was just like, yeah, you're right. So I just got back into like searching that out, I got into writing every day and freestyling every day, and I started linking with more people that I had met along the way, that we had a commonality in just like how we came up. I like to party, but I was very serious. I was well connected, but I was like not rigid. Like I liked being.
You were fluid, able to
yeah, exactly. Like I liked being a part of a little bit of everything, and I didn't like being boxed into like one kind of way.
You can kind of see how, and I wrote down a few things here because I love what you just did here. You can kind of see how you had this dichotomy from your younger days to now. Hey, look, I'm not trying to be locked in no gang. Yeah. Like, I want to interact with the groups I want to interact with. I know who I am. I'm a Grant. That's who I am. And so my goal is to be able just to showcase who I am. Now, sure, I don't have like a clear goal or path, but you have so many good family, right? And I mean, it comes in different forms, but you get to interact with so many different people.
Yeah, definitely. After that, even, selective family as well, where, starting to really see over time who was there for me and who was offering resources to me. And it really just came down to me choosing. And that's when I really was, started to take it on myself. And, first it started with like, relinking with the dude I was in a group with. And I'm like, I'm comfortable with you. Let's make some music together. Work with me. And then, and then linking with people who used to buy tickets from me when I was in a group, and linking with them and forming new groups, new collectives. And I think at that time I had relinked with my cousin because he had moved to Baltimore for a little while.
Sure.
So when he came back, he was like, "What you been on?" And I'm like, I'm about to start making music on my own. And I remember doing a photo shoot with him, and I was like, "This is what I want to do. I want to make music. I want to be like a touring artist. I want you to be my touring manager, and we're gonna do it like we're gonna be a family band, like Earth, Wind, and Fire or something like that." And having that conversation, it always was like that. And I remember, so at that time, I remember I was like, I need to come up with a name for myself. So how it came up, my homie was saying, you always. At the time, I was a little wild. I would try a little bit of everything. I was definitely into I was into partying, and I would go to raves, I'll go to mosh pits, I'll go to events, I would be everywhere. And my homie's like, "Man, you always do some gnarly shit." And I was just like, And because when I heard that, I happened to look at he texted that to me, and when he texted, the G in gnarly was silent. And I was like, at that time I was playing with my middle name, my father's name, Michael, and I was playing with maybe Mike G or something like that. And when I saw that, I was like, "Oh, that's it right there, Cam Gnarly," because the G is silent. It's still because also when I was doing visual arts and my illustrations, I would always write Cam G, period, right? So then when I added the gnarly, that was just an aspect of just the gnarly stuff that I would do.
That's dope.
And when I looked it up, what gnarly meant, radical and excellent and all this other stuff. And I was like, okay, I like these things. It gave a meaning to it. So I remember, I changed my Twitter name to that, and that's just what it was after that. And then I started making music by myself. But then I had this serendipitous thing. Like the same guys that I used to freestyle with at these dirty college parties, they're graduating from college now. I didn't graduate from college. I went to 2.5 years at Cal State San Bernardino, doing psychology with a minor in communications, getting my credits in that. And then I did 1.5 years at San Bernardino Valley, getting child development courses because I wanted to get into the nonprofit sector. Because after I graduated from high school, the work that I was doing, I was working at continuation schools as a tutor. Because remember I told you I was in IB and in Avid, so that was within my skill set to write. I knew how to do that stuff, to teach them how to write in MLA format, how to help with essay writing. I had graduated with AP English and AP History under my belt. Like that was something I was really good at. I always had a good grasp of history. So
yeah, clearly.
Yeah, like I said, yeah. So
absolutely.
So when that was the work that I was doing around that same time I'm doing this. I'm going to school around the first few years of rapping. And, working in education in some form, after school programs or nonprofit sector kind of thing. And then started meeting more people in the arts community through MySpace and stuff like that, doing shows together. That was back when I was with the Hi-Hats. But now I wanted to do something different, and my friends had hit me up, and they're like, "Yo, we're going to make our own company, and we're going to start throwing our own shows. You want to help us find the talent for the shows? So I know you're tapped in with that kind of stuff. Do you still do your group?" And I was like, "No, I don't do the group no more, but I make music on my own." I had no music. I was like, "I make music on my own though." And it's like, "Cool, you could be the opener, right?" I'm like, "All right, bet." Little did I know, the dude who ran it, his uncle was the buyer for Zara. So I'm like, oh, they have bread. So I was like, oh, okay. So at that time, I'm like, let's book who's popping. So I'm like, all right, I'm sending them names, and they're hitting up the artists. I'm hitting up the artists too. So first show is Kendrick Lamar. So it's Kendrick Lamar. And then I hit up other artists that I liked at that time, and that was my first taste of talent buying. But I wasn't the money. I was just choosing. And I would hit up these particular artists, and I put myself on. I was the first opener, right? And I was doing songs that I was working on, so I would rap them up until I didn't know the words, and I'd freestyle the rest. And I'd bring my homies up, and we'd be up there mobbing and stuff like that with my collective that was called Airborne International at the time, or what grew later on to be Crilly Fam. But
Yo.
So that was like these are the beginnings of the first shows that Cam Gnarly was doing. I was slated as Cam Gnarly, and then in between doing these bigger opening shows, I was doing open mics or doing stages in Leimert Park or doing stages in Riverside at the Vibe and doing shows at Common Ground and doing stuff with Noah and them. So after years of doing that, even it didn't really start to truly shift to start getting like listeners. By the time I dropped my first mixtape called Cam Meets World, was like a flip of the Boy Meets World. I don't know if you remember. Remember Boy Meets World, the intro when at the end of all that, the cartoon came in and he was like had his foot on the globe and it rolled to him and he put his foot up. That was the cover art. So at that time, I got like this dude named Manuel Pierre III, who is more known now for he did the artwork for the what's that song? Groceries, remember that song? The song with Chris Brown and Janae Aiko. Remember the little the cartoon photo he drew? That was his illustration style, and he had linked with. I met him from the times of doing these shows with the guys from college. They had this. They called it Abstract Evolution. So I was a part of the booking for it. But then it got so big, they started doing like voting and stuff like that. And that's some of the first little issues I started having with like other artists in the community because I was on both sides of it. But I was putting myself on, so I was opening for. At that time it was, just to name the list. And don't trip over all the names I'm about to drop. So, but it was like Kendrick and Janae and YG and Casey Veggies and Pac Div, Dom Kennedy, Currency. At that time, I already did stuff with the Cool Kids. And then even from those shows, I built like these little micro relationships here and there where some of them I was really a big fan of, and I don't like to meet my heroes. So I keep away from them. But the other people that I was like a moderate fan of or like, the degree of separation was smaller, I would get to know them more. They would invite me here and there and I'd get to learn more. I'm sure they may not even know how impactful they were to me at that time. But,
How old are you at this time?
I'm probably like 21, 22 now. Like the time, 21, 22, to maybe 23 too. The times of like, getting to know Pac Div's DJ Val the Vandal, who still plays my music now on his radio shows and stuff like that. Now to see what that has grown to from those kind of relationships when they would invite me to these shows or doing shows at the Roxy and stuff like that. Or seeing them pull up to shows when it was like... and my cousins, like I grew up with my cousin in Crenshaw off of Adams and Harcourt, they went to school with some of the guys from Overdose. So I would do shows with like Scheme and Overdose. We would do back and forth shows to like Vegas sometimes and in LA. So it was always cool to see like these people that I'm watching in these music videos of the emergence of the blog era in rap at that time and be rubbing elbows with them and learning from them at the same time. And all, still getting my bearings as an artist. So I had put out my first project in 2012 called Cam Meets World, and that got like a good little love on some of the blogs. I got on like Two Dope Boys, I think, or what's some of the other ones, like Hot New Hip Hop or something like that, like one of those blogs back then. And then I put out. Then from there, I wasn't like. Then from there, I was just active. Like I would be doing all kinds of open shows, selling tickets. Like I said, opening up for all those shows that are the names I dropped, and some of those shows were my homies' production company that they were throwing. So I got to pick the artists that I wanted to open for and the communities of sound that I wanted my name to be a part of. So then it was cool seeing people listen to my music, also listen to the other artists that I really was a fan of too.
That's love.
So. Then that's really from there. I just started building from that. Like I had a big springboard, but then I started building from that. From dropping projects and doing shows. Like just being a strong performer was like a really strong calling card for me too. That prompted people to listen to my music. And then I want to say like when I really felt like I got my bearings, I put out that mixtape and performed a lot of those songs for almost like 2.5 years. Me and my homies went to South by Southwest at that time, so we had met like, so not gonna name any more names, but like a lot of people, like met a lot of people at that time of the blog era of like some of the artists that we've come to know and love over these last 10 years since then. So at that time it was like the start of it. Like we went to the first Illmore. and that was thrown by Ill Roots, and having some of my albums like posted on Ill Roots and all that kind of stuff. I would wake up every day and be on these blog sites, like be on Alright and be on illroots.com and be on Two Dope Boys, and that was all I really wanted at that time, to get onto these blogs and to be a part of the publications where I was going to search out this music every day. So then it came to like 2014. I dropped my I did a compilation album with my collective at that time, and excuse me, did a compilation at that time, at like 2012 or 2013.
Which is wild, because one of the things that we're talking about, like 2012, 2013, like this is a very interesting time to be alive during this stuff. You know what I mean?
Musically, yeah, for sure.
This is like,
it's crazy.
Yeah, this is like,
it was the beginning of like you saw the guys on the cover of that XXL become superstars. Drake and Nipsey and I saw opened up for Kendrick during Section 80, and watching that trajectory, and just watching us all like chase after that and like go run behind that. I sat there with Pac Div at a Powerhouse when we were all eating at excuse me.
No, do your thing, brother. Yo, that's wild.
But like watching the trajectory of LA hip hop change at the time, from what we knew it to be with West Coast rap and Ice Cube and Dr. Dre's and all that, and even like from the Battle Cat era and the East Siders and all of that, and go from this new space where what they used to call the New West, when it was Dom Kennedy and and Pac Div and the Cool Kids at that time too, and other artists that you were seeing be in that mixture. The Big Sean starting at that time, Currency starting at that time, J. Cole popping up at that same time, and Drake becoming what Drake became, and it was just a wild time to be making music, and I feel like it was just an honor to be like creative at that time, because I formed my own way at that time, and like that was like the first. In that time span from like 2012, 2014 was like the beginning of like what I would look at as like my grassroots fan base really growing and trying to listen to my music, really starting to understand what it meant to have like a really strong song and watch people like really support it. I think the first big song that I thought, I mean, I'm sure there were others, but like the first song that I really saw people like, oh, they're connecting now, it's working, like it's starting to work, was Levitate in 2014. I wrote that in 2014 on a bus. And that was like the beginning, like I feel like, of like the musical journey of really starting to see people connect with the music, where I felt like a lot of my upbringing was relationship based. A lot of my connections were never transactional. We're always very much like, we like each other, we vibe with each other, we resonate with each other. Let's build.
Yo, that's dope.
So like, yeah,
dude, I have so many.
I'm sorry, I know I talked a lot, but
no, listen, this was amazing. Okay, so I have a few questions here. I'm gonna go back just a tad. Feel free to drink water. I don't know if we have tea too. If you want to see, yo, listen, we got you some. You know what I'm saying? We got you good. If you really cook up, bro. Don't even worry.
No, the camera's not on me, right?
No, you straight. You could push the mic back too if you need to.
No.
Don't even stress. Don't be stressed. Yeah. So one of the things I'm really curious about, right? Especially because you mentioned you used to travel a ton, like over to like LA and stuff.
Yeah, Lamert
Did you ever go out of country? Like,
oh yeah,
not out of country, but more out of state to get more of that like southern, maybe, or eastern, western hip hop. Like you ever got like that flavor?
Not so much on the East Coast. I really wanted to always be a West Coast artist, I really not so much on the East Coast, but I did have East Coast listeners, and I would garner East Coast listeners from my appearances on these blog websites. So. But I would go out of state. Yeah, we would do Texas. We did South by Southwest in 2012. I would do it every year after that. So that was my junction to being closer to down south. We would do Arizona a lot too, and then what else? San Antonio, Oregon. Like that was really like my whole thing. And I would do Northern Cali too. We do Oakland and San Francisco.
Yo, that's lit. So okay, the second question. I'm so sorry. Hey. I don't know if he's watching, if he ever will.
Ooh.
But one of the people I'm really curious about is your brother. You know, how's your relationship with him?
Oh yeah.
I just totally forgot I totally forgot. I was doing really good at getting everyone.
No, I mean I know I said a lot. I guess like there's so much I could say about family. I guess I was trying to like segue it into letting it make sense because I could literally sit here and talk with you all day about my family.
Yeah,
Like, it would have nothing to do with any rap, any songs, or anything. I'm trying to keep it on point.
No, you're good.
My relationship with my brother. Both my brothers. I have my youngest brother is 10 years younger than me. I have two brothers. I didn't even mention that at some point during like, it had to be like, in the year 2000. Yeah, my brother was only a year and a half younger than me. So when I first started making music, he was still in high school. So, and he never really had an interest in like going to college and stuff like that. So when I first started making music, he was right there with me. He would come to the parties with me, and plus my cousin Kevin was there too. So it was just the three of us. And he would learn and be around us so much that, you know, at that time I was, for anybody who remembers that time, you know, I remember people used to be like, "Oh, he had goons and stuff like that." I had a collective of artists, and probably only about 4 of us rapped, and there was like 10 other people who was really just there. That's my brother, that's his homie, that's my homie. He got the trees. He keep it on him just in case. You know, that kind of thing. So we had a big collective of homies. That's the producer. He does graphic design and that kind of stuff. And we would really be mobbing. You know, that's how the Curly fam. It was what was Airborne at first. Was like my first like creative juncture under a title. Was like, you know, this is what we're doing is Airborne, and then it shifted when we went to South by Southwest in 2012 because some people were calling us Trill. At that time, Trill was very popular, you know, A$AP Rocky, that kind of stuff. Yep. So Trill was very popular when we got out there, and we would be meeting people. You know, we had it on us when we got out there. So people like, "Oh, y'all got that Cali good, y'all keep it Trill." And I remember my homie saying like, "No, we don't keep it. We from Cali. We don't keep it Trill. We keep it Krill." Yeah. And it just stuck. So it became. The Curly fam became what that was, and my brother was a big part of that. That was like a family aspect where it was just like it was the homies that were in it. It was me, DC, rapper, Aaron Mays, a rapper, Preem Beats, a producer. He had done production with like Casey Veggies and stuff like that at that time. My other homie Jaime the Jedi, and then just a slew of friends who were just a part of the collective, who would be there to support, wrangle the crowd, there to just jump up and down when the set was going on, there to be muscle if necessary. It was you know, it was a big mob mentality, and I was definitely at the front of it, even when I didn't realize I used to be a little neglectful of like how much control I had until I started to realize the impact that I was seeing around me, and I was like, okay, I really gotta take the reins here, and not even take the reins for myself too. Like, 'cause I got for a time almost before I really became what I would look at as a singular Cam Gnarly artist. I was really comfortable with just being a part of that, and I think that was also a byproduct of like being a part of a group for a long time. And like I said, also coming from a big family too.
Everybody,
I feel better when I could bring everybody with me. But over years, you realize you know, as Nipsey said, everybody can't go. So, but at that time, you know, my brother was right there with me. He was wearing the merch. He was another Krilly. He was Krilly Chris and that kind of thing. You know, everybody had their own little Krilly names and things like that. So yeah, my brother's a part of. Even my younger brother, who 10 years younger than me, he's born in 2000. You know, he still to this day gets called Krilly. Like, people call him Krilly. It's so funny. Me and my cousin would be laughing. The cousin I was talking about that I bumped into at the 7-Eleven, we're laughing. You know, he just turned 23. Wow. And we're laughing. I'm like, ain't it crazy? Like, they're calling him Krilly. That's just some shit we made up in Texas, like, in 2012, you know? But to like, I cherish that, though, too, because it's a byproduct of what I was trying to get at, or this legacy that I built in my community as an artist, that it's not just something from my brother, but it's also like how people remember me. It's people's memories of the shows, it's people's memories of the merch, it's people's memories of the music and me. So it's really it's dope. Like, I look at it as taking what I have learned from my family and putting it into the music, taking what I've learned from my community and putting it into the music. And it's always been really important to tell my story And as I've told my stories over the time, I used to always tell people that, I spent a lot of time bouncing back and forth from IE to LA, but then also being more centralized in my stories coming from the IE, because I would be around people from the IE and they would tell me like, if you went to school here, here, and here, you from here. And I'm like, you right. But every weekend I was over there. It was like, that don't matter though. So, I would make it really intentional, especially being a part of the music community, what I was seeing forming in the IE music community at the Vibe in Riverside, and coming up around Noah, and seeing what Curtis King and them were doing, and what Stevie Crooks and them was doing, and my homies from UTB and all of them, like, we all grew up, when we talk, it's like a fraternity of people who really grew up on that stage and really harnessed their craft. And I saw that shift of being the guy who was trying to get it together into the guy who really had this like big crew around him, into this guy that really started to put his energy and his heart and his passion into his music, represent his community, and be intentional with it. And I'm so glad I got to do that before the Vibe had closed down, because I really started to see that shift from me dropping like my first quote unquote popular song in 2014, and then becoming a popular performing artist from 2014 to 2016, and then dropping another popular song in like 2016, and then just kind of being on this progressive way of like, I'm dropping, is making the water ripple, I do my thing, I tuck away, and I do it again, and I do it again, and now that's just a part of the process. And it's a blessing to see it happen. It's interesting to think about it that way when you ask me how my brother feels about it, because I remember, especially because my younger brother, my brother Christian, we're only a year and a half apart, and we're also, there's also the like this numerology thing that goes on too in my family, where my mother is born on the 12th, my brother is born on the 12th, and I'm also born on the 12th, and then me and my brothers, we all also have the same initials too. My mother named us, I'm Cameron Michael Grant, there's Montel Grant, and there's Caden Malcolm Grant. Sorry, I put your governments out there, but just to, you might want to bleep those later, but just to say, like, we all have the same initial, CMG.
I got you.
And C is a third letter of the alphabet as well. 12 is a multiple of 3, and and then also I was born in September, the 9th month, also another multiple of 3. I'm from the Inland Empire, the 9, another multiple of 3. So and 323 is a number I see a lot all the time. So when I was think about these numbers, I think about my brothers, because it's
there's 3 of you guys.
3 of us, third letter of the alphabet. It's just a constant thing, and but yeah. So there's so much wrapped. So much of my music and what my music and my branding and stuff like that, I don't even look at it like that. It's just a byproduct of my upbringing and my family and my community, and I just try to find a way to just like harness it into my personal expression, and that it just happens to be music. But if I was still doing illustration, I'd probably be drawing landscapes of different areas that I came up in. But they love it. It's really dope to see my family, when we get together at family parties, play Levitate and like start doing that's why I started doing the electric slide thing at the shows, because they started doing it, and then just seeing that self-reflective thing of just like, man, like I don't know what it's like to like quote unquote make it. I'm still doing it and making my way, but to see how much things have changed since I started, and then also reflecting on what it looked like before I even knew I started something at all. It's been a trip. Like it's definitely been a trip, because even right now, I was just talking before I left the house. I'm doing like this 30-day mindfulness thing, and it said today play one of your favorite games. So I took some time before I came here to play Halo with my brother.
Hey.
And somebody called him, and it was like Krilly, and I was just like in my head, I was just like, what does that feel like for you? Like, and he's just like, that's just what it is. And he was like, you made it, but I kept it going. And it's just like, for me, that's what I mean. Like, I just trying to create a legacy that people can resonate with, and also feel that it's intentional. It's about positive energy. It's about being self-reflective and understanding a knowledge of self, and also being like self-actualizing. Like, I chose these things. Like, I chose these things, and I followed up with these things, and I followed this path, and it's brought me here. And I've had so many amazing experiences, like, that I can't tell you. Like, I mean, I could tell you, but then I have to tell you, like, and then I met this lady who I met, like these random occurrences that are all bipartisan to just the fact that I decided to rap one day because I heard somebody rap lyrics from Malibu's Most Wanted and didn't know that it was from a movie. You know, like it's just weird like that.
I'm really fascinated. One particularly by the story that you have. One of the things I'm really fascinated with is you talk about how you communicate with your community, your family, right, and the connections that you build, the networks that you build, the essentially like the I don't know the family that you built, right? Whether you said the chosen one or the one that you had in your blood. But one of the things I find is interesting. You don't have like a lot of. It doesn't feel like you have a lot of enemies, right? If I mean maybe, but like it feels like for sure though is that like you're very seems like very down to earth and trying to do your best to try to like get people on. You at one point you were bringing people from hey just connecting them to be able to open for these insane artists that like who influence literally the world, and being a part of that process to help promote and get these people to where they are, because you're literal, whether you want to take credit for it or not, but it's true, you did something to help these people get to where they need to be. You connected them with more artists and their exposure to help them get to where they need to be. They wouldn't be where they are if it wasn't for even just the help of you, right? So I think one of the things I find is that you're seems very. I was talking to Noah, and Noah says like, I always say like seems very humble. He's like, no, it's not humble, it's grateful. Mm-hmm. But I find that it's so interesting that you are there's no ego. It's like obviously being a rapper, you have this big thing that's like, I'm the best, but like for you it seems like it's obviously you have this pride of being a Grant, but that's where it is. Like you're just confident who you are. It's not about being better than anyone else. It's just knowing that, hey, this is who I am, and the world will see that in due time.
Yeah, I'm just trying to actively be the best me that I can be. I don't really look I mean, I'm sure like these things are cliche, but it's real, and not a lot of people really walk in that. They are constantly competing with other people. They are actively, constantly trying to be better or outdo other people, and I'm not centered in that. Like that doesn't bring me peace. Like what brings me peace is trying to outdo myself. What brings me peace is trying to add on to my legacy and be able to look back and be like, hey, look, another notch in the belt. Like that makes me feel good. Or being able to just make the people who have helped me proud, because in the way you said it, I really don't give myself that type of credit, but I credit others who've done that for me, so I guess I should. But because, for every person who's ever shared my music with somebody, you've helped me. Like, you helped me more than you know. For someone who I've never met or I don't remember, to say like, oh, I saw you here and I remember you. Or I played this, or this song, your CD I bought from you because I supported you. It's the only CD I had in my car for like 6 years and I still listen to this song, like that helps me. Or the people who I heard you, I want to book you for this show, even if they didn't pay me for the show. Like it helps me because it put me on a stage in front of these different people. And it's also dope that my music taste and my personal choices was able to put other people on and my friends on to different artists that we weren't typically listening to. Like I said, like those moments of trying to convince somebody, like, listen to Drake, he's gonna be tight, like, and seeing that change of it happen. And it's dope to also have experienced that on my own. So for me, I'm not just doing it for me. I'm doing it for the memory of my grandmother, who used to tell me to be confident in my drawing and stop trying to erase all the time. And I apply that to my music too, to be confident in what I'm creating and not be so self-editing, and also to give it to God and understand that what I'm doing is not of me. It's just coming through me, and it is not lost on me that a lot that I do is a byproduct of the places that I've come from, or the people who took the time to hold my hand or teach me something or even go against me as well. So when you say like, do I not have enemies? There's people who do not like me. There's people I don't like as well. But I wouldn't spend my energy trying to perpetuate whatever that is between us. Like most of the issues that I have with other people are momentary. They're typically stem from most misunderstanding or a lack of communication, and you just got to accept those things. So for as well, like it's all educational. It's all beneficial in the grand scheme. I don't like having issues, but issues I'm not I'm not disassociated from having issues with people. So, I wouldn't say to even this day. Also, some of your worst enemies could be your best friend sometimes because it's such a teaching moment. I remember the first dude I ever fought, I know his first and last name, and when I see him, we say what's up. Or people who we had beef at or in 2012, 2013, and when I see them, they say what's up.
The whole voting days.
Yeah, so it's interesting, but I definitely it's made me more comfortable in who I am. It's an active practice to not get lost in ego or not to become jaded by any of these things, in the good or the bad. And if I could take it to anything that I've learned from when watching this video with Dave Chappelle talking to Maya Angelou, when she was like, don't pick it up, don't put it down. You're never as good as they say you are, and you're never as bad as they say you are either. So any compliment, any praise, or any defamation or negative energy, I just take it for what it is in that moment and keep on doing what I'm doing, because that's what my grandma would tell me to do. But it is being rooted in gratitude and also just trying to create the most positive mentalities that I can have without disassociating myself, like I said, from any negative too, because I know both.
I have one final topic to talk about. Yeah. It's gonna be a little bit personal, so I'm just curious here. And then I have some questions to ask you, and then I think we're done. One of the things I really want to jump into is and this is I'm just curious, your journey with love. Yeah. Especially more recently. Yeah. How's that been? You mentioned that obviously girls have always been in our life. You rapper, you always try to
Yeah, definitely.
But I'm curious on as you've grown, how that relationship has changed, obviously since you were young versus kind of
now. I used to feel like I said, the first time I asked my dad about love, he talked about it in the interest of taking care of someone. And I found myself trying to do that sometimes with the wrong people, trying to take care of the wrong people. And it's interesting that you said that too. My last project was about love. Mm-hmm. My last project that I put out was called Love Really Is. And I made that project at the beginning of the end of a relationship, and then within that year meeting the partner that I'm with now. And she also actually helped me do the illustration. The illustrations on the cover of the project, she drew those too. So shout out to Marisol, shout out to La Dosa Tita. She did the illustrations. But through my journeys as an artist, I've definitely gone through my relationships, my romantic relationships and friendship relationships as well, because all love in essence have shaped a lot of those relationships and a lot of those mentalities. And I hear it in the music, from how I would talk about women or talk about love in a romantic sense, and how I would talk about self-love and what, or where my self-love meter was at that time period. But looking at it now, I broke it down in that project, just to keep it without getting too crazy. Breaking it into that project, I put it into these concepts. And when the songs that came out of me during that time was I learned about love, first and foremost about, like I said, if way my father put love to me was about connecting with somebody and being willing to be selfless and take care of them, then the biggest lesson from that for me in the times that it didn't go the way I wanted was understanding my boundaries. So that was the first song on that project, was Boundaries. And then to also understand that the boundaries that I created were rooted in the healing from the situations that I had gone through before, so that it's not necessarily trying to have boundaries for the sake of avoiding closeness, but have boundaries for the sake of my own healing. And that led to the second song, which was The Heals. And then after The Heals, and once I was secure and rested in my boundaries and where I was in the healing sense, I was ready to be loving and to be sweet with somebody. And that led to the next song, which is Sweet, which was very, telling my girl I want to love you always in all the ways. And
great song. Hey, listen. It's a great song, by the way. Sorry, go on.
No, thank you. But then after that, after Sweet, then I think the next song on there is Exchange. And then understanding that the exchange of energy is also recognizing that when you're doing that, no matter if you're rested in your boundaries and in your healing and you're being sweet with somebody, you're still exchanging energy. And the way I took it from that standpoint was from a more like sexual or intimate way, but also I don't want to be intimate with nobody if I am not rested in my boundaries, healed from some shit, or I can be sweet with them because otherwise the intimacy gonna be a little rigid.
You're gonna exchange something.
So exchanging the energy as well, and then after that, also taking the time to go back to the heart, have those heart talk conversations, which is the next song, and I applied that too because the things that I have gone through, it's the practice or the routines that keep me responsible for those parts of myself, so I don't lose myself in being sweet with somebody, or I don't lose myself in exchanging energy with somebody, be that intimate or friendship wise. So having those talks in my heart to check in with me and be like, where am I good? Is my boundary fence still strong, or did I let it slide because I'm being too sweet? Or have I checked in with my healing, or am I not healing because I'm being too sweet? Or am I lost in the sauce and am I just exchanging sexual or intimate energy? And, so having those kind of heart talks to check in to be where I'm at, and then just understanding for me, the last song was it being love and understanding love too, which a lot of that too was about loss too, because so many other people, at that time that I'm making that, the cousins I used to go visit in LA ended up doing life in prison. And then
I don't want to mention their names. Continue.
No, yeah. And then from there, yeah, we might have to bleep some people. But even that, like, I'm just being open. But understanding love for me as well is just understanding loss and transition and change, because how I love myself is different than how I used to, and what used to be okay for me is different now. And then as a byproduct of understanding my boundaries and understanding my healing and understanding my love languages, it allows me to be a better partner for anybody that I'm involved in, be that a friend or an intimate partner. So, me and my girl are constantly talking or communicating about how we can love each other better, or really unpack a lot of the stuff that we're coming into this relationship with, because that's just something that doesn't stop. My parents have been together for almost 40 plus years, and and my dad, like I said, my father comes from a similar thing. It's a legacy in that regard too. So I'm my ideals of love are very high, and a lot of it has to do with connectivity and union and growing and building together and creating a foundation, because that's what I come from. I was brought in love. I was created in love. So, where I am in love today within my own partnership is just taking the time to unpack our pasts and show up for each other where we are and meet each other where we are. And, you gotta just lift each other up and take it one day at a time. I'm sure my girl can attest to that in the times where we've been at odds, or the times that we've had our most beautiful romantic stages. It's the same amount of communication and connectivity. Like it's a practice. It's work, and I apply that to not just intimate romantic relationships, but friendships as well. It's the same thing. The way I love anyone I want it to be the same across the board. Facts. So I want the way that I love my girl to be felt by my man's Paul. Does that make sense? But like I want my homie to know the same way I'm being intentional with her. I'm trying to be intentional with him. I want to check in with him and make sure he's good and see how he's doing, because we have these years of history. A lot of my friends, like I said, I've had for 20 years, who I'm not I know a lot of people, and I have like surface level relationship with, but if we connect and I lock in with you, I care about you, I'll take the time to call on you and check in on you and water you, and in that way I try to do that for everyone, because I if you call yourself loving me, I'd hope you do the same for me. So
golden rule. Yeah,
so that's where I am at in love. I'm in love for sure, and I'm trying to make it happen.
Bet. All right, so I have two quick questions here. First, looking back at your life, and just kind of seeing the journey, going from that kid, seeing your parents. One's from like this Venice Beach world, another one's from like from Chicago.
Yeah.
Seeing the family that they've created, going out to LA on the weekends, going to being in IE, growing with a brother and learning how that interactions with even with the sports life and the music culture and the fashion world, and seeing you going up all these streets throughout LA and being out and interacting with the world and seeing some crazy things, but also being able to understand a little bit more about who you are in terms of like what it is to be a Grant, and seeing the way your father raised you, seeing the way your mother interacts with you and the love that she likes to provide, and your father's sternness, but he's also trying to give you love as well, and how hard they're working in the healthcare system, and how often is you are like this going through your life story into kind of where you are traveling through music and seeing your passion and literally living almost a dream, right? But it happening in front of your eyes, and you're you're active participant. Looking back at that, how do you kind of see yourself from from your past, like standing here today, reviewing over that and looking at your life, how does that kind of make you feel? What do you, would you make any changes? Is it one of those things where you just kind of look at it and it's like, wow, like, are you proud of yourself? Like, just looking at yourself, how do you kind of feel?
I definitely feel proud of myself. I feel like I've made the people who have poured into me, and who, especially the ones that are not here anymore, I remain steadfast and rested in my faith, and I walked in that. And I've even said in songs sometimes, like, I'm really walking in my legacy, like it's happening in front of me. And it's a blessing to be able to see that it's not like lost on me. Like I don't think I'm gonna wake up one day and have regrets, because I've actively tried to show up as the best version of myself. And when I wasn't, I was in the house working on it. So, I feel proud of myself. I feel accomplished. I know there's more that I want to do, and more areas of growth within myself. And as I've grown, I find new thresholds of like, oh man, like I didn't know I could feel this way. Or looking at myself sometimes and being like, dang, like I'm really not that kid from North San Bernardino anymore the same way I was. Like I mean something to more people, and more people mean something to me too. The areas that I've occupied mean more to me than I really recognized at the time. And now I look at it all, and it all plays a part to me. And now, especially at this place in my life, trying to find the ways to honor all those spaces and try to give them their flowers, and give them their just due and their benefit for how they've accompanied me or impacted me on my story. So, I'm in that space now, and I feel like a lot of, so many other things we could talk about, but, after COVID too, like such a time where I got very self-reflective, in between the albums from going from GoPro in like 2014, and then The Posse Prevails in like 2016, Nirvana in 2018, and then 333 and at the tip of 2020, and then now Love Really Is, and getting into this new space. I feel like a resurgence to even tell my story in a different way, from a different, with a new set of eyes, with a more self-reflective point of view, to say, how do I take a song like The Nine and turn it into an album? How do I take how do I take the energy that I was cultivating after Nirvana, to be able to do it again, and do it to an even higher degree? And looking at life now with these new levels of opportunity, it's dope. Like I love it, and I know that I wouldn't have so much of even the work that I do outside of music. Like all of it is a byproduct of my family and my upbringing, my community, and my musical path. Like the reason I'm able to connect with the youth that I work with, I know it's because I make music. If it wasn't for that, I don't know what would be my olive branch, to find that connectivity. And maybe it would have been something else. But would I change any of it? No. Like some of the, and I didn't mention some of the worst circumstances of, getting, almost going left. I could have ended up exactly how some of my closest friends are. God bless the dead. Or I could have ended up a complete shell of myself.
Sure. And,
I wouldn't change any of it for the blessings that I've been able to see and experience and live every day.
So then, my final question before we move on to the last piece.
Yeah.
What's the dream, man? Like, what are you fighting for? You know, what do you want out of life? You know, what's the goals? Like, if you could just go for it, you know, what's future Cam looking like?
Future Cam, the goals for me really is to do my part to help the overall humanity. Like, it's not even how I live my life is for the betterment of myself for sure, but my life is not my own. And I'm connected to everybody who's ever connected to me, so it's my life's goal to pass on any information about myself onto others, create and add on to the legacy of my family, and also, you know, continue to inspire my family to get theirs as well, to find their happiness, find their peace of mind, find their find their chosen family, find their community, and live in that and grow in that. You know, I see my father do it, I see my mother do it, I've seen my aunts and uncles do it, and, you know, just to pass it forward. This life is temporary, so to just really create and, like I said, walk in this legacy and do it until I'm gone, and then hope that I'm remembered for the things that I offered and the things that I gave, and you know, and just continue, you know, hope that I can inspire another generation to do the same. Like, this is not, none of this is mine, you know, like, this is all borrowed. This is all, like, every time is I was watching this is another person born in San Bernardino. Lakeith Stanfield said this in Atlanta. He said life is just a series of close calls. He's like, how could you know that you're really alive if you didn't know that you could die? Like, I look at life like that, and I think about the first time I lost the homie Jamal, or, you know, the first time my cousins got shot, or the first time that I was dodging bullets, or the first time that I was in a scenario where, damn, it could have went left and I could have been incarcerated or dead. You know, I think about all of those times, and it adds to the gratitude of the day, because the day is the gift. You know, life is life itself is a luxury. Don't got to be luxurious. So for me, the goal isn't like this big old house and stuff like that. I've experienced big houses. I've experienced wealth. I've experienced, you know, money. I've experienced, like, you know, my things that I want for myself and my family is abundance. The things that I want for my family is a healthy and strong lineage, so that it's not just dependent on me. Like, I could go and the same way that my father feels comfortable in knowing if he goes, I got it. You know, like, I want to be able to carve out some spots in the world, so I can say when I go, I know that some people got it. Not got it for me, but got it from me, and can add it to the, you know, add their sauce to it, their seasoning to it, and then add to the overall humanity of the space. Like, because this is, like I said, this is not mine. This is, my life is an accumulation of my mother's life and my father's life and his mama's life and her mama's life and her great grandmothers and her uncles and Selena Johnson, and, you know what I'm saying, like, all these different people who had their own path, who inspired them to do whatever they decided to do. I'm just trying to, you know,
Pay it forward.
Yeah, pay it forward, make the most of it.
That's dope.
Yeah. Until I'm gone, I'll be out of here. One day.
So yeah, so we have what's this thing we have is called deep questions. I have a few questions to ask, and then that's it for the show. So I'm just gonna hop straight into them.
You said deep questions?
They're deep questions.
What was this? You said that wasn't shallow.
All right, well, hey, just let you know, it gets kind of weird.
Okay,
so
sure.
Here's how it goes.
I'm kind of weird.
So, oh man, okay. What do you sense? What do you sense you take for granted, and why do you think you do?
What do I sense that I take for granted, and why do I think I do? I take for granted probably even and it may contradict what I just said, but
cool,
sometimes I take for granted the things that are the most consistent, and I probably battle with this a lot too. Where's the wood at? You got some wood in here?
Yeah, this would.
Yeah, knock on wood. I probably take for granted the most that my family is always here. Because I'm so, like I said, because I'm the young or in a large legacy or bigger family, I take for granted that they're always there, and I know that they're not going to be all the time. And as I grow up, more and more of them start to go away, and sometimes it's super daunting, and I probably lie to myself so that I can get through the day. But in those moments, I'm also probably taking for granted that they're always going to be there. So that's probably something for sure. Like if and maybe that may be my answer because we've spent so much time like talking about my upbringing and my family and stuff. But yeah, definitely taking for granted. Taking for granted anything that I love the most that I think will be here tomorrow. Yeah, it could be gone. So.
What is your greatest fear about getting older?
Ooh.
Sarah chose some ruthless ones.
About getting older? Well, I mean, not a fear, but I guess I'm just gonna add like a footnote. It's not scary, but it's like it's a harsh truth of just like having to watch those that you grew up with go away. But probably my biggest fear
is that like alone, you mean?
Not even so much being alone, okay. But just knowing that your time period is back there. And probably my biggest fear more than anything, I guess, would be like, to wake up one day and not remember. That would probably be my biggest fear, because once everybody's gone, that's fine, because at least I have the memories. But if I lose that,
well, we got this, right? Hopefully.
I won't even know. I won't remember. I'll be like, who is that? That's me? Who is that? So probably that, and probably, on my mother's side, trying to also exercise memory too, because when my grandmother was passing away, she was suffering from dementia too. So, I get scared of that too. Scared of that, scared of if or when my mother won't remember me. And in that regard too, so that's probably pretty scary though too. For myself and for anybody that I love, like if I had to endure or surrender to the fact that they don't remember me anymore.
Okay, we're gonna lighten up the questions.
I'm sorry.
No,
I'm already.
Just like,
if you go deep, I'm just gonna talk about how fragile life is fragile.
Let's do a little break here. If you were a superhero, what would be your 3 superpowers?
I'll get 3. That's cool. The MCU kind of ruined this one for me, but I used to say time travel. I used to want to travel back in time, and then impenetrability, because the further back you go, it ain't safe. It ain't safe. So probably like to be I don't know. I'm sure there's another word for it, but just like to not be harmed by no weapon,
sure,
anything like that, and then probably to be able to either communicate telepathically.
I was thinking like you were gonna do something like where you can speak to people, and like get them to like change their thoughts.
See, that's the thing. I don't want, and I thought about that too for a long time, because I don't want to be able to change people's minds. Okay. Because I feel like, I don't know, it's a really cool power, but I don't know if I should have that.
Too much.
Like, don't let me have it. Like, don't let me have that power. But if I was to just do things like, if I could just have things that doesn't have to do with like me oppressing other people's like ability to choose, then I just would say I would go back in time, so that if I gotta go back in time to change something, it's on me to convince he or she to not do it. I can't just make them. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And then to also just be impenetrable in that way. It's just another word for it. Not impenetrable, like just to not be able to be harmed. And then to be able to read minds, just
facts.
That's all.
That's dope. All right.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
So I'll have
to take that back. Yeah, I'm gonna change their minds. I'm gonna be able to change their minds. Him with that young Jedi.
Hey, did Tupac? Listen, bro. Just do not go, bro. Tupac.
Yeah, Pop. Sit down. Sit down. You're not change the song. I'm not going back to Cali.
Yes. Okay, my final question.
All right.
What is the most important thing you didn't do but should have done?
Oof. Should have done, didn't do. I don't even. I guess I didn't do something that I didn't do. Should have done.
What's the most important thing you didn't do but should have done?
I don't even. Give me a moment. Didn't do. There's a lot to do with like admitting something, or like because then it's like what.
This is content, big. Okay,
Yeah, like, what did I do? Yeah, you're baiting the content. I guess
I'm joking with you. I'm totally joking.
If my mom was talking to me, I probably should have graduated from college, but I didn't. But that's neither here nor there. I still ended up in classrooms and working as an educator, and even what I learned and my education in the arts in the streets still brought me to stages and still got my art out into the world. So I can't imagine that my education would have led me anywhere more than both of these two places. So, but I definitely was supposed to. Uncle Sam's still asking for it too, so I probably should have.
Shoot, they just
I didn't.
Hey, look,
I hope they forgive it.
Cam.
Yeah.
This was a fascinating story. How can people connect with you, man? Just to keep following along.
You can follow along on my website, camgnarly.com, to like get immediately connected with me. You can join the email list and stuff like that. You'll get all the updates when there's new music or new offerings, or if I have something on my mind, I often send it out in that regard. You can follow me on all social media platforms under the same name, Cam Gnarly, CAMGNARLY, on Instagram and Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr. What else? Come to a show.
Yo,
Come pull up to an audio dope or pull up to, any of my upcoming shows or listen to an album if you want to get to know me more. And I love hearing how people interpret the music and what it means to them, or, where you're listening to it at. So, yeah, that's how you can find me. That's how you can stay tapped in.
today we have a painting that was this is, we're gonna say Jaja. I mean, Mayette Christian has donated a painting for your story of your life. That's my mom.
Oh, thanks, Mom.
And yeah, you chose this painting. Is there any specific reason?
I'm a big plant person. I really love plants, and I really got into plants actually like right around 2020. I was really interested in like making my space, filling it with more life, and I was, like I said, I was going through different transitions like we all were at that time, and aesthetically I just loved plants. Like I just always have enjoyed nature too, like going out into the nature, going outside, just walking into the fields and like retuning the caliber of my personal antenna to the tune of nature than being surrounded by like other people or buildings or stuff like that. So to me, when I see plants, it's just super calming. And then also kind of called out to me too because the blues right here, they look like the evil eye. And and I also like to feel protected from negative energy. For those that listen to my music, I'm all about positivity, positive waves and being positive impacts in the community. So seeing the evil eyes on top of the plants, like it's just like it literally feels like it embodies me. And when I saw it, I'm just another one of those like serendipitous thing. Like, oh, okay.
My mom's a huge gardener. She's like plants all over the house.
Yeah,
that's cool. That's interesting how art can just kind of connect someone.
Yeah,
hearing your story, that kind of makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, man. Keeping life. It's a garden. It's a garden for sure.
That's dope. We want to thank everyone who tuned in tonight. We also want to thank, just in general, thank you for coming out and just expressing yourself. Obviously talking about your life is not easy. We have things, you have good, you have bad.
Yeah.
But it's cool just to remember some of the people that really made a big influence. But I always like to give you that last opportunity. Any key people or anyone else you want to just kind of highlight, maybe someone who made a lot of influence or just any few further thoughts for whether it be the guests or whoever listens to this, whether it be today or 10 years from now, someone wants to pull up your story.
Definitely want to say my RIPs, RIP Holland Atkins, the one I mentioned on the Rapping in the Back of the Bus. RP Jamal Hamilton, one of the first homies I lost when I was in high school, very young. Also, my friend who she was like one of my biggest supporters and one of my best friends when I was in high school, and she used to take me to all my job interviews and stuff like that. I didn't have a car for a long time, and I really credit so much of the shift in energy within my own career, my own mindset after her passing. Because so much of what we would discuss together came to pass. So I want to also give a rest in peace to Adriana George, and this is my friends who helped me along the way. You know, my Raphael Noble, Ramon Williams, Aaron Williams, my brother, my mother and father, the entire Grant family from in the future and in the past. And if I could leave anyone who listens to my music and or is a fan of me, or trying to find their way through it, I definitely want to say, just be, find yourself, find your center, find your wholeness, be positive, and try to avoid the negativity, mind elevation. You don't need the rest of it. And definitely want to give a shout out to my girl too. Shout out Tita, I love you.
Thank you everyone for tuning in. We really appreciate it.
She calling me right now.
We out. Please subscribe. Please like, comment.
Peace.
Please follow Cam. He's well deserved. And have a great night.
Thank y'all for having me. For real, this was fun. Love this.
That's dope, man. I'm glad, man.
When we do the part 2, yeah, we gotta do the other thing.
Oh yeah, this is gonna be real life. To everyone, peace, love, and happiness, even after death.
Peace.
Good night. You good?